All right, everyone. It is good to see you. Hope everybody got something to eat. We've got some fantastic lunches. Thanks to Shamika and county staff for making sure that fed minds will be active minds. We have a number of items on our work session today, and per our contemporary protocol, we have some items for future consideration around which we'll simply answer questions that commissioners may have. And then we have 3 items for future consideration. Then we'll have presentation and some further discussion. First item for future consideration, where we have some question, is the T-Plus 2023 project that involves the Winterville Storm Drainage Program. So are there any questions of that?
Yeah,
Commissioner Fisher.
I was looking at the timeline. It seemed like it's been pushed back. And I know the cost and construction cost, but our timeline been pushed back.
It's been pushed back. It's been pushed back just a little bit. We went out with some additional survey to make sure that we were trying to capture what we needed to from a design data standpoint. So it's been pushed back a little bit. Majority of the land that we need to get for the project is really right on the front of the people's property. There's just a few of them that we need to kind of get towards the backyard to the outfalls, but it's been pushed back a little bit, but we've got most of it lined up, ready to go. So if, assuming that the mayor and commission approve it, we know some of the cost is extended. I was talking to Stephen Bailey just a minute ago. As soon as we get that, we're going to look at a few options on some materials, see if we can get some of those material costs down before we put it out to bid. So hopefully what you see in the packet today, we'll be able to buy out a little bit more than what we anticipate right now.
And my next question about the land, so we haven't talked to homeowners, stuff like that. Is the land property, right? Is that, yes, that is private property that we will have to purchase?
We will purchase some temporary easements and a few permanent easements.
Okay.
The majority of the road, the majority of the project, of course, is along the corridor. We're redoing the curb that's not there anymore. So when we put the pipe in, we'll be getting into some front yards a little bit, if that's the right way to say that, some silt fence, a little bit of grading. So the majority of that will be a temporary easement for area. And so that just be some disturbance as we put pipe in, we'll tear up somebody's entrance to their driveway. And so we'll need to replace that. We'll put it back. That won't be a problem. It'd be just a minor inconvenience to do that. May seem, we say minor, maybe a little bit more to them, to the homeowner, but we'll move as quickly as we can. And then there's just a couple of them where we call the outfalls, where the pipes need to turn away and run perpendicular to get to the low areas. We'll have some permanent easements in there. We have had an affected property owners meeting last week.
Okay.
And we had six came to talk about it, and the majority that did come were the ones that had most impact. And so we walked the property with them. They've asked a few considerations, like, if this tree is affected or something like that. So we're working with them right now. So we met with those that wanted to come talk to us. We sent an affected properties letters to everybody.
So you don't think we're gonna get any pushback there from any about, again, I understand we're gonna put it back, but disruption, a little bit of that disruption, what we're trying to do. You feel like we might get any pushback or anything that, our perspective, that you think we need to be made aware of?
I don't know of any right now that you need to be made aware of. I'm sure, as we move through with the final and kind of be able to paint the lines, if you would, on their property, a few more questions may come up or considerations. That they haven't shared with us yet, like, my septic tank over here, or my drain field, make sure, and we would just verify those things. So I don't see there's anything right now currently that I feel like, staff needs to advise y'all, like, this is a potential problem. I just think right now, of course, following our development process, get y'all approved the preliminary plans, what we showed, that allows us to move into that final design, kind of fine tune, if you would, some of those areas that we need easements, have those final conversations with those property owners. As things come along, we could definitely advise the manager's office to let y'all know if we think something's going on.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the Winterville Stormwater Management Project? All right, moving on, we've got two projects that sort of are conjoined with one another, and you might have seen kind of in the conceptual drawings in the package that with Lexington Road corridor improvements and then the Lexington Road sidewalk gap. And I guess I'd sort of take these in conjunction, given that you've got overlap between these two. Yeah, Carol.
I think the documents are in here, but on page, I think it's page 8, I was looking for an overall like compilation because of all these projects that are on that Lexington corridor. And so on page 8, and I think there's a visual down there on page 13. And I just want to check those two documents have all the projects that are in SPOS 2018 and 2023 that are in progress. Correct.
In progress,
I mean, not necessarily in project process.
Sort of
That
identified.
exist,
projects.
identified projects. So this, for example, I'm looking on page 13 includes that sidewalk that was approved, like the concept, I can't remember what it was, but approved like a long time ago because it was before I was on the commission. 302. What does the 302 refer to? Do you see what I'm referring to?
they're just project identifiers, so we could separate different phases of different programs. Like, you know, if you say multi-use trail, it goes a long way, so we broken it into components.
So if I go back to, because this is what I was trying to figure out the other day when I went to the user group, the public meeting,
Yes, ma'am.
and back on page 8, you're looking on that. One thing that I see missing from that chart, which is very cool chart, but it's which, like there's, I think in 2023, there's 2 projects. That's where you have the corridor and the sidewalk gap project. So like which like the projects and the sub numbers, like I kind of like I was looking for something where it was like all together so I could understand it.
Sure.
And maybe that was too much to put in here, but
On slide 8, what we were trying to do was build that collective knowledge from the 2018 program and how it moved forward. So showing you things that it had already been done or already funded or programmed, like the South Side sidewalk from Johnson Drive up to Gaines School. Y'all have already funded that. That's in process.
right.
And so then you can see the 2018 SPOS and the 2023 status. So you can see how some of those move forward is recommended. And part of the gap project may show that it's partially funded under what project in 2023.
Yeah, and so I guess I was looking for some document that had the sub-project names under it as well, so that I knew which one was the sidewalk gap, which one was the corridor. And then I thought the multi-use one, the Satterfield Park Trail, that's a trail, but where's the one where it goes along the sidewalk on Cherokee? Is that in here? Okay, that's up.
There was an approved project concept from several years ago.
That isn't, that we, where is that? Is that on this chart?
It's partially labeled. I mean, when I say partially labeled, it's partially shown on 302. I mean, you've got the multi-use path there shown on the slide 13.
Is it on the chart on page 8?
Commissioner Myers,
No, ma'am.
would it be helpful if we had,
I'm just looking for, what I'm trying to get an understanding of is because when I go to these meetings and I'm like, well, there was this one and none of them are all built. So I was looking for like a comprehensive chart and map. I thought that I was getting it there with this, so I didn't want to ask. So I was really looking for something that was totally comprehensive of all the things that are in progress. Either they're on the spot, you know, they're just being identified, or they were identified 4 years ago and the construction hasn't started on them. So I could understand how it all went together. Because when you're looking at these, the ones that we're looking at right now, and that's So on Lexington Road, the ones that we'd be approving, I did talk to someone, I mean, there's not, sidewalks on the jail side. Right, from the jail down to where you'd have that, that multi-use path that would go by the quarry and join over to the,
Well,
Firefly. So,
That would be, that's correct. Out of the funding that we have for 2023, that is deemed as a future sub-project.
right, so that'd be a future project in the 2023 or in the, is it, or in a new?
In we don't have enough money to build that in 2020.
Right, right. So we're actually looking at, that's that multi-use path. How are you gonna get to that multi-use path? Like if it's built? Like if you're walking or riding on a bike?
Part of the 2018 program, we
Right.
have the sidewalk program along the south side.
Right,
So we're in land acquisition now on that. So you would have to cross the road.
and that's what I'm concerned about. I mean, because I was looking at it myself. I mean, that's a pretty busy road to cross.
Correct.
Right, so I'm concerned, a little bit concerned that we're gonna be making this multi-use path, but the only way to get to it is to jaywalk across this or ride a
I'll
bike.
bring your attention to sub-projects 101A and 101B. Those are the pedestrian like hawk signals to try to get across from the jail side
Okay.
to there. But we looked at several things, even if, if you tried to realign Jail Road with the opposite road on the other side, you're either gonna take out the tag office or a private business on the other side to line those up properly to put a signalized intersection. So that is a large, very large project that would have to be considered in the future. Trying to, going back from, I say, going back to the user group and some of their desires, if you would, and something they felt strongly on is really trying to build off the connectivity that's already there. And it kind of generally worked its way from west to east. So picking up from where DOT was, moving out that way. So you didn't constantly have those gaps. Because like if you wanted to put that section in a sidewalk or multi-use path, say in front of the landscape division's property down, where that gap is. Not that it's not a viable project, not a good project. It just eats up time and money. And then therefore something else has to give. So you end up probably, either you don't do the connectivity to the Firefly Trail or you give up probably the sidewalks on the north side there at Hughes and Mabry. So they're left without nowhere to go either east or west because it's a ditch section along the major corridor and it's hard to get there.
The other thing with this is, and I'm gonna follow up with this with interim manager Jones, is that path that's going along there by the quarry that's in this design. There, right now, we're looking at like if you draw an imaginary line from there over to Carriage Lane where the Firefly comes, that's where the Greenway comes in right now. So we're looking at a project that's shared on my and Commissioner Taylor's districts that has a greenway space in it that goes over to there. And so while we're looking at that picture, I'm going to get back to Manager Jones over here because we're also on the agenda, I think, for September is the approval of a land development that's right in between those two. And there's some vague, like not baked in and promised connection between, like it's a land in between. And I want to find out how we can get something in that. So we have the right of way. Mr. Kettle, who's has the property, I think has been, interested in that, but there's nothing down to promise. And with that piece there, I want to make sure we have access to land on the other side, so it's all actually connected in the end. So I'm gonna follow up with that. That's on my to-do list anyway, so I'm gonna bring that up.
Other questions from the body about the Lexington plans generally with the sidewalk gap and the other corridor program? I do want to make one note, and I'll be making a pitch kind of simultaneously to commissioners and to staff. And that's that much of this lies within the Lexington Highway Tax Allocation District. And of course, that's become one that really throws off more dollars per year than any of our other tabs, almost $500,000 in fiscal 25. At the end of this fiscal year, we'll have about $1 million accumulated in that pot. I'd be very interested in borrowing against future funds, whether that's internal borrowing or traditional borrowing, so that we do get more on the ground simultaneously, rather than just sort of doing this piecemeal over the series the next decade. I'd like to see us get all the way, really from Southeast Clarke Park past the quarry to the Firefly, so that all the kids and families who live along there just have that immediate proximate access. And just want to put that in staff's lap and say, I'll be following up. Any other questions about Lexington, either the sidewalk or the corridor plans generally? All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the
Thanks, Jeff.
future consideration. Thanks, Derek. I appreciate it. All right, and first up, we have Victor Pope, our transit director, who's going to talk about the transportation development plan, something that they with our consultants have been working on fervently here for quite a few months.
Hello,
Good to
y'all.
see you, Victor.
How are y'all?
Really good.
Thank you all for having me here, today's work session. Here with our team, RSNH, who is also assisting the transit department while we are recruiting a planner. They're helping us through the DEP process. Today's purpose is to update you all on our findings and recap some information from the previous meeting back in January, when you all completed the visioning survey. Talk about the results of that survey and also some scenarios going forward when we talk about transit services here in the community of Athens-Clarke County. We'll also talk about some very preliminary financial numbers as to what services may cost as we look at them going forward. And I'll offer a moment to get any feedback or answer any questions that you have about where we are in this process. We'll also talk about the timeline and next steps of what you will see in the coming 3 quarters or so. Later on in this year, we'll have peer roundtables and also a staff roundtable, and also provide your public comment. There we go.
Update breaks. But while we wait, my name is Beth Hoffman. I've been working with Vic and your awesome Athens Transit team on developing your transit development plan. I say our because I'm also an Athens resident proudly, for 2025 to 2030. And I joined the RSNH team back in March, but I have been around Athens, UGA alum. My family lives around the community. So lifelong Athens resident, and proud to be involved with this. I know that y'all have been through a couple of the tasks already that we'll talk about. We'll give you a little bit of an update on what those look like, kind of the results of some of the stakeholder involvement that you may have discussed last time you heard from the Athens Transit team, and go through some potential scenarios, potential results of things that might come out of the transit development plan. I'll emphasize that we're kind of in early stages right now, which is exactly where we need to be when talking to you about what may come out of the transit development plan. So we're really just kind of presenting ideas that can then be combined. You'll see when we get to those slides, can then be combined to the ultimate outcomes from the transit development plan.
Yes, thank you, Beth. And I would just like to reinforce that no decisions have been made at this point in time. We're just presenting scenarios and options to you all for consideration and also further discussion at a later date. technology gremlins that have got us today.
While we're waiting on technology, can you remind everybody what the purpose of the TDP is?
Yes. So the TDP is essentially a 10-year horizon roadmap for transportation services in the community. The TDP will help us guide decisions as far as which type of services we will deploy in the community, where those services will be deployed in the community, and also help us plan for the future financial impact of those services and ensure that we are financially resilient in providing transportation services to the Athens-Clarke County community.
So for those of you that are familiar with like the service delivery plan for public utilities, similar flavor just for transit.
And I'd like to add that this is a required planning component for receiving FTA grants, and also it helps us to ensure that we're operating the most efficient service possible in the community by looking for redundant services such as our sister agency, Campus Transit. They operate quite very similar service in the downtown corridor. So as we go through the TDP process, we'll also be looking at efficiencies and ways that we can maximize the financial resources that we have, as well as our current equipment and workforce resources.
He's done.
Yeah.
Oh, about the financial of this, especially you know, expand services about our areas. We have to consider how we're gonna pay for this.
Yes, sir.
Again, you know, right now we're not charging fair,
Yes, sir.
and some of my colleagues are in favor of us and fair back in, but I think it's just something that we're gonna have to consider. In the future, we're gonna expand our services, we're gonna make improvements, we're gonna have to make improvements. So what I like to look at though, if we do that, you start back charging fair, what impact would that make on helping that operation? Because again, I know we do maybe T-Splosh money a lot
Yes, sir.
to uphold transportation. And I think that's not gonna be sustainable.
Yes, sir. That
So, you know, we got to, as colleagues, we got to be to the realization that model is not gonna be sustainable.
yes, sir.
We're gonna have to come up with some type of plan. If and when we add that charging, right, or use our services, so.
Yes, sir. And thank you for that input. And you're absolutely correct. The fair collection, that's a policy-based decision. So how we go about that's a discussion that we can start it today, but it's going to last for quite some period of time as different members of the body come with their outlooks, and also the community provides feedback to help shape that policy. It is true that, yes, as we look to expand, it will consume more financial resources. And there are only a finite number of avenues to really bring money into the transit department to provide those services. We're currently blessed. Thank you all again for the 2023 T-Splosh referendum, and so the community for approving that referendum. And we look forward to submitting a project for future referendums. However, those referendums, the collected revenue amounts, those are also finite. So in the interest of not consuming all T-Splosh funds, we would like to talk about other ways that we can bring in revenues to the department to provide those services.
So Vic, real quick,
Yes.
you all have run projections on what revenue was in the past, what revenue could be if we started charging
Yes,
fares
sir.
today, right?
Yes, sir. That's
I think Commissioner Fisher might be alluding to that. So we have those models. We can factor those models in. If we were charging revenue today, here's what we're projected to get, and here's what the impact would be on operations. And then there's a delta there, right?
Yes, sir.
There's still a
That's
delta. And so it's slightly smaller than what we fund today. However, we can put that information in front of you at any time.
Yeah, I don't want, you know, see what that looks like, you know, what was collected in the past, no relationship that we had with UGA at one time. They taking $1 million, yeah, when we was charging. That is not there anymore.
So I think
Yes,
that's
sir.
gonna be part of the
Correct.
conversation.
Right, so that's not there anymore. So again, I think, I just think we just got to be realistic that we can't continue without sponsor funds to fund transportation. Now, whatever type of model we may use, start charging, we have to factor in all of those. Like I say, and one other thing I would like to see, how many communities around the country still do free fare? And you all may or may not know that, but I like to see that too, see how that's that.
Yes, sir.
Like Patrick?
Yeah, I'm for pet free. I think it should come out of the general fund. It's a public benefit for our community, especially for the low income and the elderly who need to get to doctors before they need to work. I do understand the burden that it is causing our transportation department, but I believe we just need to look at it differently. And consider how our public is benefiting from that. And if we do go to fair again, we have to hire a company that does the boxes, correct? Because we don't do that in-house. And that's an additional cost. I did have a question for West Broad Street.
Yes,
Landing. Do y'all have, some of these bus stops don't have landing pads? And West Broad Street seems to be a very heavily trafficked rider usership. Do you have to go to GDOT to get that, or you can do that on your own?
Yes, sir. There would be some coordination needed with GDOT just because of the state right of way there. However, we can definitely work internally to come up with a better answer as far as how long that would take to work with GDOT to get the approvals for this, and also what resources we need to actually make those improvements occur.
So I've got Melissa and then Jesse and Karen.
Yeah, so I know that higher frequency is a high priority. As a regular bus rider myself, I understand that. Has there been any consideration of higher frequency on targeted routes or maybe in-town loop routes where they're traveling through the most dense communities? I spend a lot of time in Chattanooga and they do have that, and those buses are fare free. The rest of their system may not be, but those in-town loop routes, and there's 3 of them that kind of coalesce in a central area, but they reach out into like each segment of the area.
Yes, ma'am. I think that's a excellent point. And I think, as you mentioned, Chattanooga, their downtown circulator with using the e-bus,
Yeah.
that's an excellent
Yeah.
benefit to their community. And as a person who goes there fairly frequently and uses it, I love it.
Yeah. that's great.
I would like to see us look at something similar here in Athens. I would also suggest that when we talk about frequency of our routes, that we sort of separate ourselves from the current day status or current day service setup. And as we go forward, look toward a more user-centric, where are the people going, where are the points of interest that they're interested in traveling to? So if you're coming from Prince Avenue, you may not need to necessarily go to the east side Walmart to go shopping. You could maybe go out to the Publix. That would be more convenient for a user.
Or else.
Yes, ma'am.
That's where I shop.
Yes, ma'am. And so finding those points of destinations and creating routes that better serve those points. So people are spending less time in transit and more time doing what they're meant to do.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of those UGA routes kind of serve that function, but they've changed those routes and they pulled away. The health sciences route changes to that and remove that function.
Yes, ma'am. And we will begin to discuss that once we review the service plan that EJ is creating and also identify those service inefficiencies. That'll help us fill those service gaps more effectively.
Thank you.
Jesse?
Yeah, I guess just because fare free is coming up and I know we're at the outset of your presentation, so I do want to let you get through it. But if we're getting that model, a few things that I'd hope would be included in that, an explanation of whether it's been factored in or not. So Patrick brought up the fare boxes. When we're talking about fare boxes, there's the cost of installing them again, but also the cost of maintaining them and paying someone to collect the fees from them. So, you know, a comprehensive overview of what it would actually cost just to collect money in the first place, I think would be helpful. It was a bigger chunk than I think a lot of us realized back when we were looking into this back in the day. Another two big things from past service that I think would make it hard to look at how past service pays for future. We talked about UGA already, and I think now that we've gotten over the hurdle of working out a new agreement with them, it's hard to see how it makes sense to go back, in part because I don't even see what the incentive would be for them to want to. With the new structure we have in partnership with them, although more information on that could be helpful, but also CCSD students or kids under the age of 18 were moved to fare free a couple years before we went fully fare free. So depending how far back we're looking, the ridership numbers aren't even going to be super applicable if you start factoring in youth. And if we're talking about bringing and senior, yeah, that was so the last thing I was going to get to is we should also have clear info on how much of the expected revenue for transit is going to come from agencies that ACC Gov also funds. So this is, I think, like the most complicated thing to try to address because transit's looking at transit's budget. But if transit gets a bunch of passes that were purchased by DFACS or the library or the Athens Area Homeless Shelter or Advanced Behavioral or the Council on Aging, on and on and on. There's all these agencies in town that would buy, often at a bulk or discounted rate, passes for their clients to ride the bus, who now can just ride it for free, taking away the barrier of cost, but still adding this barrier of them having to get and keep track of their passes. If we're funding all of these agencies and then they have to buy passes to fund our transit system, from a meta level as a mayor and commission, I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense financially for the county to see that as a win. It might be a win for the transit department in its own budget if that were in a silo, but as a county, we're not actually netting very much revenue if we start to factor in all of those agencies as well. So I just hope that whatever modeling we get estimates how many of the riders are actually going to be clients of those agencies, likely to be getting passes from those agencies.
Yes, sir.
Carol.
And I just wanted to add into that I think what happens in Washington in terms of transit could make a difference in terms of what kind of funding is available going forward for transit in like this. And interestingly, the other day is very short, I was talking to a young man who's a pharmacy doctoral student whose work is on transit systems and pharmacy deserts and the importance of transit for getting people's prescriptions. And so I tend to be on the side of supporting the fare free as much as we can for various reasons here. Anyway, that's all I have to add to the mix.
That's right. Vita?
Yes, I guess this, I know we are just taking a lot off of your plan here. But while we're talking, I think that's what Commissioner Fisher is saying, to take all the pros and cons and make a decision. We have not done that in the past. We have gone with, this is popular now. What he's saying, get all the information so we can be objective in our rationale. And I don't think that pro against, but it is questionable with how we're funding transit. So I think all of these comments are excellent and probably what you need to take away to know what we're thinking. And I'm ready for your presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
So Victor, it looks like technology has become our friend.
Well, you know, I always enjoy talking with you all about this. It's a very multifaceted subject and I think it deserves a great consideration. But thank you all. So as I mentioned, project status update, recap of key findings and scenario planning, and also letting you all know what the next steps will be in the transportation development plan. So as a project status update, we have, as I mentioned, received your feedback from the visioning survey that you all took in January 2024. We have taken your responses and basically helped categorize the overall community responses and come up with some scenarios and also some visions that we have for transportation here in Athens. We've talked about a couple modes of transportation here and also how that may play out in our community. Just a quick recap. I know we talked about this for a second, but the TDP is a 10-year horizon. I'd call it a roadmap It is not something that we follow letter for letter, because the TDP is something of a living plan. Athens, it's changing. Every day it's growing and the community needs are changing. So the TDP has to be flexible and able to change with the community as quickly as the community is changing. And also, of course, financial feasibility for a 5-year work program. That'll help us and you all, as you all go through your difficult task of trying to decide how to best serve the community financially through the provision of services. And this will help you all sort of gauge that over a 5-year period for the transit department.
So Vic, real quick, sorry to jump in here, that financial feasibility model, will it take into account everything we were just talking about? Can it take into account everything we were just talking about?
It can, however, I would say that for the scope of the TDP and when discussing fare policy, I don't necessarily know that we would be really done developing a fare policy at the same time as the transportation bill. And though they could fit together, I would caution tying them as what a comprehensive document.
Would the fair policy come out ahead of this?
It would likely come out after.
But to follow up on, manager on, some things that we asked for though, that comparison, can we see that?
Yes,
Even if
yes.
the fast stuff is not in there, just take a look at that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, sorry. Let me. Yes, we can absolutely come up with a comparison in the near term. That could be something we could probably turn around, not say in the next, within 30 days. At the
Because
longest.
that's kind of information that you already have,
Yes,
that you've been compiling it
yes,
all along.
yes, ma'am.
It's just that you have and you can share it with us.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I'm just confused by this. I mean, if this is a plan that's supposed to map out a 10-year horizon, that's like a service delivery strategy, both in terms of where we want to go, who we want to serve, but also how we're going to fund it. Seems to me like we would need to kind of resolve the fare question when we're finalizing this plan. It's hard for me to understand how we wouldn't. And also the T-Splosh question, right? We talked, I forget if it was last month or the month before in our meeting about how, maybe we should pre-designate a portion of the T-Splosh funds for things that we know we need to fund. I mean, this is relevant to is this one of the things that we know we should do that for? So I guess I would correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm trying to understand how useful is this plan really if it's not finalizing a plan for the funding?
Commissioner, I think you make an excellent point. To better clarify, I guess my statement, the timeline of the current TDP had not considered the fare policy. We can definitely adjust that timeline to incorporate the fare policy discussion and decision into that, which would definitely help shape the financial picture for the future and also help you all with the understanding of what type of resources we're going to need to supply the level of service that is selected ultimately. But just the current timeline as it's currently written today did not incorporate that in there. So we can definitely adjust.
So if we bump to the next slide where it says development of a financial plan, for the purposes of today's discussion, is the assumption status quo that there wouldn't be a change in fare policy, or is that?
Yes, sir. That's the assumption as of today, that everything would stay as is as far as revenues that we're seeing or all revenues that we're seeing.
Okay, so this plan is conceiving of fare free and just assuming we're sticking with it. And really the question before us is if we want to change that policy,
Yes.
then probably now is the time to do it. And that would shake this up. Is that more what I'm hearing? Or maybe not shake it up greatly. It would require modifying this.
Yeah.
And at least something of a kind of another lens through which we could conceive of this is that, hey, there are some points we want to get to in terms of functionality and operations of our transit system. If we want to fully achieve that, here are some ways we could pay for that. And so, ultimately, I think what we want to see out of our transit plan is what we want to see out of our transit plan. And then we just have to say, how many dollars are we willing to commit to that through a variety of sources?
I was just about to step in and say exactly that. So Rachel Hatcher with RSNH, I'm the project director. So that was very eloquently said. This is a visioning document. So much like a comprehensive list of potential projects for your community that may or may not be funded. They provide you with the cost of those projects and they provide you with mechanisms through which you can fund it. But the ultimate decision of how you'll go about doing that happens after the completion of the plan, where we say, in order to operate in this way, you can act within your finite resources today. If you want to invest in this way, it would cost this much of additional resources, both in capital and operating, and gives you those strategies. It lays out how you could accomplish that. But then you move into the actual design phases of it. So you have your master plan, your vision, what you hope to accomplish, and then those next 5 years are the actual implementation stages. So if you think about it like a roadway, you say, well, we would like to see an improvement on this corridor that includes multimodal and safety enhancements, but the actual design comes next. And then the actual refinement of cost comes next. And the determination of exactly how it will be funded comes next. And that's very similar to the TDP. We work through your vision, we work at solving issues as well as reaching to the future to meet your goals and objectives. We show you where you're likely to find funding shortfalls given your current resources, and share with you practical application of strategies to help you fix that delta. So that could have a scenario of hypothetical numbers for fares. It wouldn't be as detailed as what y'all are describing because there's a lot of ifs that we wouldn't know in a visioning plan. But we could show you how fare could supplement, given a lot of assumptions. But it wouldn't solve the should we, could we, because that's a policy decision. It shows a potential future if it included it or it didn't. So we'll show you some bits and pieces that you could compile in this presentation in order to reach your vision. And then we'll help you with that path forward. So think of it like applying for a discretionary grant for a building. You wouldn't necessarily know which grant you're going for or if your success rate will happen tomorrow or the year after, but we will give you that path and application of here's where those funds would go and how you could do it using these tools. Does that make more sense? Okay.
Thanks, Rich.
Patrick?
It's a low level question. So I'm loving it. The bus stop improvement. So that would, as a state, include like improvements to bus stops. Will we all create, or when you listen to constituents, you have the idea in mind to have all stops covered? And do y'all have any plans to working with DPW to make sure that the landing pads are connected to a sidewalk or what you call those little things in the street? Crosswalks?
Yes, sir. So as a overall goal, part of the goal 5 safely move around Athens, it is part of our aim to connect or offer complete connectivity between the very first part of a community or resident's journey to the end point. So we are looking to fill sidewalk gaps where we're able to do so. We're looking to place bus stops in a logical manner so that they're not too closely spaced in order so that they create service inefficiencies, but convenient enough that residents are able to find them without much trouble. As we also talk about our TDP, we will talk about different service models. And the reason why I bring that up, when we start talking about microtransits, the physical bus stop loses a lot of importance because within a microtransit model, you're able to say call in and request a ride or use your cellular device to request a ride. And it's almost instantaneous on-demand style service. So the waiting outside in the elements is largely diminished. That does offer the opportunity to potentially, save on some capital investments if that's a route that's chosen to take. Also, we're talking about bus rapid transit. If that's something that's elected, then the bus stop model that we currently look at would also change. We would look at more elaborate bus stations where the bus is at curb level when it pulls up. People are not having to step up or down. People who are in mobility devices are able to just travel on and off the bus without any type of restriction. So there are a couple different things that make me hesitant to want to really nail down a specific answer, but I would say overall, yes, we're looking to close those connectivity gaps.
last question, I just lost my train of thought. Can you explain, I get lost in this, how CCSD and Athens Transit work when people need to get to school functions?
So as of right now, we don't really function together. What we do offer is just our standard transit services. As we look at our transportation development plan, we'll be and to understand it, that is a strong desire to include our elementary schools, our base, our K-12 system on the fixed route service map. Or how would you all like for us to address it? As we know now, like for example, BHL, that lies outside of the transit service zone. That is one let's see. Yep, Coyle, Cleveland Road and Winterville. Those are other K-12 schools in the district that, you know, if a parent has to get to a school function or a child needs to get to a school function, they're not able to take school transportation, they're really faced with a challenge. And the service scenarios will sort of give mode of transportation information, but ultimately expanding the system, that's going to be a decision that we would leave this body as you all are the decision makers.
So when you're talking about, and I'm still not sure where we landed at on that first part of the conversation. Thank you for trying to explain it. I'm still not sure.
Yes, ma'am.
But as far as scenarios where we are, I do think that you're kind of taking notes about these schools, because the other scenario is institutions or facilities that provide some type of healthcare and mental health services. I have a major institution in my district, and they're short of that bus line, like maybe 2 blocks. So folk that are really experiencing drug, and then they can't get to it as easily. Because, so is there a plan when we talk about these scenarios? Maybe we should have a list of where some of these spots should be, whether they're schools or healthcare or medical. Is that going to come out of this conversation today?
We can definitely identify those type of providers. We typically look at trip generators and travel patterns to determine capacity for service and also service needs. But I think it's feasible to say we want to make sure that these type of providers have transit access. Now, that would change some back end things as far as like routing and also maybe some or rearrange the priority listing. But we could definitely look at models to say that we want to make sure, for example, that all healthcare providers have access to a fixed route transit line, or that all, you know, as Commissioner Myers mentioned, pharmacy facilities that, you know, people are able to get to those type of institutions or entities.
Is that information we're collecting today? Just, are you making notes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Victor, also with the covered bus stops, will there be like a tier list, kind of like the traffic coming and paving? Make east side number 1.
Okay. What I was suggesting that in the original bus stop improvement program, staff went to the Mayor Commission with a list of criteria for the bus stop levels. I would suggest that, you know, we would go back before you all with a criteria list based on boarding and lightings, maybe some other environmental considerations, and say, hey, look, we would like to say that this is what we would consider to be a level 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if you all approve that, then we can go through, analyze our current stop data, analyze our current ridership patterns, and then go forward from that point. Of course, we would come back to you all and say, this is what we found, and get your feedback from that.
I was just going to add one more quickly. Follow up on Commissioner Danforth spoke with issue 12. Like I mentioned this maybe a year ago. If you want to look at a model, look at Greensboro, North Carolina.
Yes, sir.
They started a program between their KG-12 and their transit system in the city. That may give us some idea of what they're doing that, so.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right.
Yep.
To back up, we'll back up a little and go through some of the tasks that we've already completed for the TDP that are informing some of these scenarios, along with this conversation about things that we will look at as far as the overall scenarios included in the. One of those things is stakeholder involvement. We've talked to a few groups now. You've heard from your transit team. We've put out an online public survey, got some great feedback from that about what the public is looking for, got input on what Athens Transit staff and local officials are looking for. This only adds to that conversation. We have future engagements scheduled with some peers. We're going to talk to UGA. We're going to talk to the Northeast Georgia Regional Commission about how we start to make our partnerships work better for transit, and have a few staff workshops planned where we really work through the meat of everything we've talked about today and the scenarios for the TDP. More information on your commissioner survey results, because I don't know if we ever got to talk to you about that. Some overarching goals and objectives came out of that survey. This was a survey that asked about the goals and vision for the TDP from this group specifically. The three priorities coming out of that were a robust fixed route service, great. A free structure as a policy goal continued to climb in terms of what you're looking to get out of the TDP, and high frequency service was also a priority. When talking about regional service, so talking about providing service outside of the county, most folks selected let's talk about it instead of a flat no to the answer to that question. And then as far as how we're measuring whether we're successful at this, how well connected are we? Are we addressing climate and resilience? And how satisfied are customers?
Allison?
I have a quick question. What was the number of commissioner surveys turned in?
I do believe it was 6.
6. Thank you.
And the good news is those responses coincided with a lot of the public response that we got back. All groups that we talked about, both the stakeholder committee, the public, and this commission prioritized faster and more frequent service. Everyone is open to talking about a regional model, and the policy decision of fare free service continues to be on the table. So that just means we have to talk about how to make our dreams happen in another way if we continue to remain fair. So all of that, the public survey, the stakeholder committee, and this commission's responses go into informing the vision, goals, and update, along with the Athens-Clarke County TDP from the previous TDP, and the partner agency goals and objectives as outlined in these 6 documents. So we looked at all of the goals and visions for these documents and kind of pulled some collective words out and came up with the 2025 Athens-Clarke County Transit Development Plan vision. Our mission is to provide safe, reliable, and sustainable public transportation that enhances the quality of life for our community. Together, we strive to create a transit system that connects people, supports economic growth, and fosters a vibrant, inclusive, and resilient community. And the way we achieve that is through 7 goals that each have some sort of elaboration on them as far as steps to get there. But as a summary, we're interested in access and service times, facilitating community partnerships, regional partnerships, focusing on sustainability, increasing our revenue streams, however that may be, maintaining assets, and ensuring safety and security on the system. And this is just kind of an overview of what you're about to see, how we got to what you're about to see. So we have the takeaways from the existing conditions, the stakeholder involvement, the public involvement, and the current and future indicators that all go into identification of needs. Where does the transit system need to go? Who are we serving? And that can go into the draft alternatives. How are we going to accomplish that? So I'm gonna pause here just to emphasize that these are creative solutions. We're just kind of at the throwing spaghetti at the wall stage and hoping that you might throw some spaghetti with us. We've heard some spaghetti, so glad to hear that. And so that's exactly where we need to be. So these are some creative solutions that kind of will group into these generic 4 categories that are our goals for service. Eliminating service redundancies. We know that there are lots of providers of public transit service or transportation services and options for transportation in the county. So how do we make sure that everybody's working together, reduce headways? How do we provide that faster service that everybody said they wanted? Update operating hours, making sure that everybody can get where they need to go when they need to go there, recognizing that not everybody has the same schedule of a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. People need to go places at other times. And modifying service types, there is a conversation to be had about whether one type of service, fixed route bus, which is what we have now, is the only thing that we can accomplish these. So I'll back up. Each of these things has a couple of things under them, like a little bit more detail. So I'm going to go through those individually now. Starting with that first goal of eliminating service redundancies, I've talked about kind of different service providers. This is just an example of a few. We've got room transportation, we've got Megabus, we've got private service providers and public service providers with that UGA transit, the school system transportation. So how do we get all those things working together? This map is showing an overlap of where Athens Transit and UGA Transit overlap. You can't really see the UGA or the Athens Transit under the dark blue. Believe me to say that there's significant overlap there. How do we get those things working together and talking so that we're providing the most efficient transportation in our county?
Thank you, Beth. And I'd just like to add, when we're looking at things such as regional transportation, that is something if we decide to go down that road, Athens is not required to address by itself. For example, Southeastern Stages is also a regional public transportation provider. There's some cost savings locally that could be seen through the reduction of redundancies or even the capitalization of redundancies. For example, once again, with Southeastern Stages, if we're looking at a regional perspective, we can look at the trips that they're currently provided and scheduled by that the provider and look at where we have the demand and add in additional trips. That offers a savings to the local government as far as trying to offer the service and also a benefit to community as more service options in the regional aspect.
Dexter? Yeah, just triggered something in my mind. So some of our student housing, they have that apartment complex, they own invitation. Are we sending, still sending buses to those areas?
Yes, sir. In some cases, yes.
Maybe it's a conversation we need to have with those apartment complexes. I mean, how many times are you all coming back and forth to town? And maybe that could cut out possible us having to travel to those particular complexes. Again, I don't know what that impact may be, but maybe some conversation I mean, they want to have with those apartment complexes that's provided, because I know they're doing more those complexes are providing transportation to and from campus and back. So,
yes, sir. And I think that's an excellent opportunity for a public-private partnership there, and a benefit to the property owner is that they're not trying to be in the transportation business when their business is really real estate. And overall to the community, potential higher levels of service.
And that's exactly what we mean by this slide, exactly. Like those types of services, can we talk to them to see what cost savings we can find for the county? Or, yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Okay. The next sort of group of potential changes that we can talk about are how to reduce the headway. So everybody kind of expressed a desire to reduce the time between buses. So we're asking, how can we do that? What are the possible ways of increasing the frequency of buses? How can we reduce the amount of time that passengers are waiting? One way to do that is to cut all of the routes. This is, again, completely imaginary. Cut all the routes so that they're short enough that the number of buses we have there now see every stop every 30 minutes. Another way, add buses so that you keep the same routes and then there's just a bus every 30 minutes. A third option is probably somewhere in between. You start to write, says, I think someone was talking about those shorter kind of routes that go around denser places inside of the county. So like, do we keep those, make them a little bit shorter so that they do provide that 30-minute service, and talk about a different type of service, a la different types of service models, our fourth kind of group, to pick up that other type. Updating operating hours. This isn't as relevant anymore because number 21 already returned to service, and the number 23 bus are still waiting on that GDOT project to conclude, but returning that 23 bus to service, expanding the weekend service. Not all of the buses currently operate weekend service. Not all of them need to. That would be a conversation that would need to be had in terms of which ones you would return. There was an expressed desire to expand morning service hours that was slightly higher than evening service hours on the public survey. Which routes is that most relevant on? Which routes might we look at expanding evening service hours? Are there other opportunities to serve our customers better to get them where they need to go when they want to go there?
The information about the morning hours, I've always thought that we could improve our service for, my mother was a nurse.
Yeah.
And the hospital shifts,
Mhm.
7 to 3, 11 to 7, that's, did they, when they said early morning service, we're talking about like 7 in the morning, not the 2 in the morning.
I think, so some of the routes
We know.
start around 5. So the question that was asked was expanded early morning starting at 5,
Okay,
I think. So it would be.
yeah, so that would be the
some-
morning workers.
But.
Yeah, and that would
Yeah.
also capture some of the schools
Yep,
too.
that's right, teachers. Yep.
Thank you.
And I think to sort of expand upon that, if we look at the survey results, they also, as you mentioned, requested expanded evening hours. So there's really, they're
Yeah.
almost touching at this
Yeah.
point in time with the desired hour of operation windows.
Late night.
So that'll be something, and I think that's a good discussion to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, and then that fourth group was modified service types. So can we fulfill that unmet demand that we've talked about with a type of service that we're not currently talking about? This also allows us to include some of our transportation partners models. So you see light rail transit up here, the GDOT intermodal plan does include a light rail line that goes through Athens from Atlanta to Charlotte. So that would put that in the conversation. And then these have more specific slides just to start to talk about some cost. We have talked about a lot of reasons to study new or realigned fixed routes today. We've heard a lot of things like where people are going in terms of like the health department or health services or a denser route downtown. So there might be a good reason to look at realigning the routes that we do have. This number is based on how much it costs to run 3 buses in this system if you were to add some of this additional routes. So it's $500,000 per year. Regional express bus, again, this is just an example. If we wanted to get to Gwinnett in order to connect to that MARTA station, I believe the closest station is the Doraville station. How do we do that? Can we do that? Should we do that? Then we have heard some interest from Watkinsville in getting service. So we have a couple of lines just modeled just to see how much it would cost if that was something that we wanted to talk about. Again, knowing that talking about regional service was the result of that question.
And along those lines, I'd just add for the benefit of the discussion, some current developments in our neighboring communities. Morgan County is starting to press to Oconee County as far as transit goes. The Northeast Georgia Regional Commission is looking strongly at Athens as a partner in the region for transportation. I think there may be some opportunities that we can talk to our community neighbors or neighboring communities and find ways that we can provide a high level of service for the area as a whole.
And then probably the transit planners are familiar with at least part of that regional route to Doraville overlaps with a plan that's on Gwinnett's Transit. Yes.
I mean, assuming that the question here or comment just is stuff with Oconee County, if I think of all keeping up with the medical, appointments and such, that whole area in Oconee County where my doctor is and where I have to go to get blood. I mean, that's so much of that is I have to go out of the county for right now, so there's a lot of our people who are here who I'm assuming who have to, if they don't have a car, have to get an Uber or a taxi or a friend to bring them out there because obviously there's no transit service. So that is a service that may be in need.
And that would require this sort of regional
Right.
model, regional coordination. So that's another possibility or a reason to include regional services.
John?
For transfer stations, I know we've talked about the mall, the bus station out there, where people can have like a workforce route where you're not having to go through the middle of downtown to get out to Caterpillar if you live on the east side. Is that part of this plan?
Yes, sir. The plan really, as a whole, we're looking at different service delivery models. So for example, we don't currently offer any type of express bus service. As he mentioned, we do have a planned zone 1 transfer center out at the mall. That is an opportunity for express bus service from, say, for example, the downtown area or maybe the Oconee Street Ride to the west side of Athens. At that point in time, there are several modes of transit that we could offer to people further out, let's say into Bogart to maybe to the Caterpillar factory or any other manufacturer who would be interested in, well, not necessarily partnering, but
And when you're looking at that, and you're talking about stakeholders, I would recommend considering the large employers as stakeholders and mirroring your routes around their shift schedules.
yes, sir. Okay, and sir, just to add to the stakeholder information, we did reach out to these employers. Some of them did participate at our request. Some of them have not, but we have reached out to them to try to find out what are they seeing, what would be the most beneficial to them as an employer and also their workforce.
You've heard some interest from Watkinsville. I'm curious, was that they reached out to y'all or you reached out to them? And has there been any other communication with other neighboring counties?
Well, I would say it would be more from any GRC, more so than Watkinsville, although I think they are interested. They're at the table with us. Elbert County, for example, they are interested in some type of connectivity. Elbert County spends a lot of money on transportation because they leave the county quite frequently. They go as far as Atlanta in some cases. So if they could realize some type of connectivity with neighboring counties, that would help offer a benefit to their community as well.
The Northeast Georgia Regional Commission is currently doing their regional transit plan for this region. So that would have some of that information that's received. All right, just a few more service types. We've mentioned a couple of times now, bus rapid transit. This is kind of, it's a type of service, if you're not familiar with it, that has its own service lane so that the buses operate a bit more like a train, but it is with those rubber tire vehicles that you would be used to seeing or that you already have, but you have a dedicated running lane, an elevated platform so that folks can just get right on the bus. And then you kind of have a service station like this that kind of elevates the user experience, if you will, of the service. The $61 million number, if you're familiar with the MARTA BRT in Summerhill project, this is where this is coming from. This is how much their service cost. And that is construction and a few years of operation. And that would be about the same amount of, or the same distance as, say, down Broad to Beechwood, and you make a little loop down Baxter and come back, is about how far that's going. And it includes 14 stations. It's more affordable than light rail, but it can be. And I included this map as the next slide, just to start to get an idea of types of, or the lines that we currently have that are running sort of an in and out service already, where that might be something we would look at as BRT service. So I'm thinking specifically of line 20, goes out LA and highway and back, you know, so it's a pretty straight shot. Just to get creative with how we might incorporate that type. Light rail transit, I mentioned that this was included because our partners at GDOT have included it. And also to compare this number to the 61 million for the BRT, this is a number that is coming out of their state rail plan from 2021. So you're going to want to kind of multiply this. I think we talked about it at about 20%, compounding. Over the past few years, construction costs and operation costs have gone up. And I do believe this number was a little bit low on in the first place.
65 million.
That's right.
Yeah, 65 million or so with compounding interest and inflation at this point.
And this only includes construction costs. So just to give you an idea of why those numbers are so different, we're just working with the partners numbers here. But this is something that has shown up in the GDOT State Rail Plan and the GDOT Atlanta Charlotte Tier 1 Environmental Impact Statement. Those are linked in the presentation if you wanted to look at more. But it offers very fast intercity travel.
And for what span is the $65 million number from where to where?
I think it's Atlanta to Athens. And our last kind of service type to introduce is microtransit. You'll be glad to know that that Caterpillar site is included in this particular example. We did actually go in and model this, what a microtransit zone might look like on the west side of Athens. So this cost $450,000 a year is for about 3 vehicles for this green region. Here is about 30 square miles. It would provide about a 30-minute wait time, and that is in order to compare to that 30-minute headway on all other bus lines, just in keeping equity top of mind. You have the opportunity to address transit deserts with microtransit. So places that are a little bit less dense where it doesn't make sense to put a fixed route. I know that we've tried to do fixed or microtransit here. It was done a little bit differently. There are opportunities to tweak that service to make it work. It can serve your first and last mile trip. So if you have a zone like this green zone here, you can go collect folks and then drop them off at that, what we discussed, the new intermodal station there at the mall. Then they can get in on the bus, and it allows more people to have access to transit by providing that service.
I have a quick question about that dollar figure. That's for 3 years?
It's for per year for 3 vehicles.
Per year for 3 vehicles.
That's right.
And that's the cost of like acquiring the vehicles and paying people to operate them and the fuel, or?
Operations. A lot of these services are turnkey, so if you would just contract with a turnkey service, it would not be our Athens transit vehicle.
Okay, so there's no capital costs established.
So this is just an overcap of all of our options that we have available. And then what we start to do in the TDP is look at what makes sense, the most sense by putting those things together. So we partner with the University of Georgia to right-size our service, expand morning hours, return routes to service, and implement a circulator and microtransit. We put all those things together from our menu of options that we talked about today, because that's what makes the most sense. And then you start to talk about how do we fund that through your fare policy or through any other sort of financial mechanism that you want to start with.
So quick question. Next steps here, is there going to be a prioritization of efforts? Prioritization that says, hey, you know, with your current funding situation, with your current needs, here's what we would recommend doing is 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
All right, well, so our next steps, we'll come back to you with a financial plan and scenarios based on the overall feedback that we have from you all and also our peers and stakeholder discussions. That's going to be done in basically a draft document format prior to the final document coming to you for approval. So if there's something that based on the survey data and demographic data that we've received that we are not including in the document, this is the time that we can address that and include that in the plan. And also, this is the time that we would start coming up with cost information to allow us to budget for this going forward in the future.
So should we contact you if there's a thought, or should we go through the managers?
I would recommend probably the manager's office just because I know that, sometimes I think the manager's office is
Okay.
probably the best point of contact.
When do we get the financial plan?
We'll be looking at delivering that in Q4 of this year. So, the November, December timeframe.
And are we expected to vote to accept that, or is there gonna be another work session on that specifically? Just because it sounds like there's a lot of stuff here that everybody wants to work through.
I think we'll come back with you. I'll send something out. And, if y'all have questions, which I'm sure you're gonna have, if there's enough questions, I think another work session may be appropriate.
And Vic, we've covered a lot of things today, even some things that are maybe beyond a 10-year horizon. I know that we did some engagement with the commission. Big picture, can you summarize if there was any consensus on priorities from that?
Yes, sir. I would say overall, if I were to say least amount of words, accessibility, efficiency, and resilience. Those would be the things that I think you all summarized, or at least responded back that you all would like to see out of public transportation here in Athens. So that people are able to get to what their destinations and engage in whatever activities they can do. Essentially, people spend less time getting places and more time doing.
Patrick?
One thing, can you go back to any of the maps that you have of Athens? One of the biggest complaints I get from constituents, is from the lower east side of Athens, like Whitehall Road, one that shows on Lexington, Gaines, Cedar. A lot of them, out of those residents, Cedar Creek area, they work at UGA. So every morning, 7, 8 o'clock, that road, College Station is packed, Lexington Road is packed. And then 5 o'clock, coming back home, that road is packed. What are your thoughts on parking rides? And also, on the east side, there are a lot of residents who are taking these new jobs on the north side of town, at the Meisners, at the NGK and whatnot. There's no real connectivity from Winterville or from the east side of Athens going north, other than going to town, circling around and then going up. So just take that into consideration. And microtransit, and what's the other word? Modified service transit or reduced headways. But what are your thoughts on parking rides? Because I think, considering the fact that 40% of Athens work out and come in, that I hate traffic. I really do. I'm not a big fan of cars. If I was in healthy shape, I'd ride a bike. But it just, our roads are getting congested and the city's growing. What are your thoughts on parking lots for people coming in from Madison, Coney, Overthorpe, all that stuff?
Well, I will say I like the idea of parking lots. I like the idea that it gives people a point that they can connect with the public transit system. They can leave their personally owned vehicle somewhere outside of the congestion of the city and then take a more environmentally conscious option into the city that helps us in multiple ways by reducing the downtown traffic congestion that we see, reducing the occurrences of pedestrian vehicle interactions, and also it helps the transit system as far as the road being faster. You mentioned College Station Road, and College Station Road is undergoing a somewhat of transformation right now with the expansion of the vet school. They're adding parking there. We had talked with UGA Auxiliary Services about using that site as a potential location. Signs right now point to that being a strong possibility in the future. We're also looking at our current services in that area to see how we can tweak our current services to remain within our current budget to do that parking lot without impacting the connectivity between other routes. I would say to go back to the initial part of the question, I think parking lots serve a critical point. That's a jump off point because not everyone will live on a transit service line. Not everyone will have transit access. But if you can give them a point where they can access the system, then it's beneficial to them. And that's what we overall strive to do because, for example, the Oconee Street parking lot, that is quite difficult to get in and out of. We've talked a little bit with GDOT about, hey, look, how can we work together to help improve the utilization of that facility? But honestly, that's going to be sort of a longer term conversation. It is something that we can definitely be cognizant of as we look to expand, as we look to incorporate these zone 1, 2, and 3 transfer centers. For example, the zone 3 transfer center, one of the sites that are a potential prospect is the Southeast Park site. Yes, a lot of people go to the park for recreation. However, on some days they do have excess capacity that can be used for another purpose, such as parking lot. So we're looking at ways that we can use current facilities as much as possible, but also where can we strategically place additional facilities to help capture the people who would be interested in taking advantage of the service.
Real quick, but a great marketing tool. UGA is our biggest employer. We have hundreds of thousands of people who work there, travel into and travel around Athens to get to UGA. Great marketing tool to say, use our parking lot, you don't have to pay for parking at UGA. If you take hundreds of cars off the road, I can get to City Hall quicker because I don't have to go through all that traffic. And I can get to my office quicker, but just think about that as well.
Indeed. And
Last one for Victor from Carroll.
I'm just following up on that for that because I did see something on some online, maybe it was Reddit, discussing all the alternatives to paying. Even I think of that park and ride on College Station is still a $10 a month fee. And people were saying, well, just go over to Oconee Street, you can park for free. So I was wondering what that usage is on the Oconee Street. Do we have, I mean, it's increased slowly, it being used, but there's still a lot of spaces in there.
And yes, ma'am, the utilization of that route or that facility has increased over the years. I will say that right now, one of the largest uses of it has to do with the ongoing GDOT construction project right now. But I'm glad they are using it.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
Right.
I think we will be somewhat limited to the utilization rate until we improve that access to that parking lot. Currently, if you're say coming from the east side, you're having to basically make a U-turn on Oconee Street, and I tell you, I don't like doing that. Or you need to come in off the bypass from the north side of Athens and circle around into it.
Right.
Both those, a lot of people wake up at last second, hey, we're running to work, and they're not willing to take that extra step or then wait on the bus to get them to their destination.
All right, Victor, everybody from RSNH, thanks a ton.
Thank you.
All right, we've got coming up the first of 2 presentations from Melinda Lord, Community Development Director, first of which will be HCD's FY 26 to 30 consolidated plan goals with our relationship with federal government. And second would be implementation of the affordable housing investment strategy, funding strategies. Apologize in advance, I have to leave at one time to another meeting, so and the Don, the mayor, break down.
Gotcha. You gotta go too? Oh. It's still over there. Only you. Wake up. A couple of people said they're going to have to leave kind of early too, so we're going to try to herd up our questions
Chair.
and conversation,
So I'm not.
if that's okay. I'm trying to get my. I just got it. Shut the mouth with. Oh, do I need to send your email?
Trying to do it again, break off to see that over.
We want. And then I can't. I want to discuss spending.
Yeah, but.
Transit.
But there's no way to share in that.
Huh? Commerce.
Commerce.
Yeah.
When it matters.
Yeah, I mean, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. Hooked up to. Yeah, I understand. Saying or share the one. Share it.
It's not that big. How do I do it? It's so big I can't share.
I'll put together. Highlights.
Starting that.
Yeah, when you go to that.
Oh, that's really good.
I just saw it.
Yeah, I just need to be able, usually when I can,
Like,
and then I can, that's what I need to. I need to have those.
We're gonna just.
I ride by, like, it made my day.
So, we see, let's get, talk about it.
Yeah, I read it.
And then you just keep it in.
Like, okay.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that.
They're everywhere. Yeah, they're everywhere.
So if we're all ready, I will begin. Thank you for having me. It's good to see everybody again. Today, we're going to discuss the FY 26 through 30 consolidated plan goals for the annual action plans 1 through 5. Chris. We're here today to review HCD's proposed FY 26 through 30 consolidated plan goals and the con-plan development process. HCD's mission focuses on affordable housing initiatives, coordinating services for disadvantaged populations, and promoting economic development and mobility in the Athens community. HCD administers and manages federal CDBG home and COC programs funded through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. ACC is an entitlement community receiving annual HUD, CDBG, and home entitlement funding. HUD determines the amount of each entitlement grantee's annual funding allocation by a statutory formula that uses several objective measures of community needs, including the extent of poverty, population, housing overcrowding, age of housing, and population lag in relationship to other metropolitan areas. CDBG funding may be used to support eligible affordable housing, economic development, public services, and public facilities and improvements activities to support primarily low to moderate income households and individuals within the Athens-Clarke County community.
Although a wide range of activities are eligible to be carried out with CDBG funding, each entitlement community must determine more targeted and specific uses of its annual funds based on their approved 5-year consolidated plan. Home funding is more restrictive and may only be used to support eligible affordable housing activities, including new construction programs. Whereas CDBG has statutory restrictions against its use for new construction, home is specifically designed for this purpose. Now we'll get into the consolidated plan process. HUD requires entitlement communities to develop a consolidated plan that helps determine where CDBG and home funding can fill the gap for community development needs that support affordable housing, economic development, public services, and public facilities and improvements activities. The CON plan is a comprehensive needs assessment and gaps analysis that considers market conditions, community resources, and innovative methods for its development. Approved FY 26 through 30 CON plan goals are required for release of the FY 26 home and CDBG applications, which will occur on September 6th and October 17th, 2024, respectively. As a result, HCD has developed its proposed goals primarily based on the Athens Affordable Housing Investment Strategy, the Athens Strategic Plan to Reduce and Prevent Homelessness, the ACC Gov FY 23 through 25 Strategic Plan, and other relevant community strategic plans. The FY 26 through 30 proposed goals were made available to the public from May 31st, 2024 through June 30th, 2024. And the public was notified of availability to review the plan and of public review meetings via multiple resources. And anyone unable to attend a scheduled public meeting was strongly encouraged to submit their comments through email or phone to HCD's staff. The HUD-approved ACC Gov Citizen Resident Plan establishes standards to promote and encourage public participation in the development of a 5-year CON plan, its annual action plans, plan amendments, and the consolidated annual performance and evaluation report, PAPER. The participation plan is designed to especially encourage the involvement of low and moderate income people, including those living in blighted areas. All aspects of participation are conducted in an open manner. Residents are encouraged to express their views, and any comments received are shared with HUD in our annual reports. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the Pine Woods Library had to unexpectedly close on Thursday, June 20th. So HCD had to reschedule this meeting for Tuesday, June 25th. And we provided immediate notification via newsflash, listserv, and through the Pine Woods Library staff and through the Neighborhood Leaders Program. Along with 4 public input meetings, HCD met with its Vision Advisory Committee to review and discuss the proposed FY 26 through 30 consolidated plan goals. And because the Vision Committee assists HCD in its annual funding recommendation process for CDBG activities, it was vital to have their input in this process. Residents of Athens will have several other opportunities to participate in the creation of HCD's FY 26 through 30 CON plan and annual action plan 1 development, including participation in the analysis of impediments to affirmatively further fair housing, and participation in the review and development of an updated neighborhood revitalization strategic area plan. Once full draft of the FY 26 through 30 CON plan and annual action plan 1 are completed, HCD will make them available for 30-day public comment review. Residents may also attend the 2 public hearing sessions on April 15th and May 6th of 2025. Now we'll get into the actual goals. So HCD's FY 21 through 25 consolidated plan goals focused on home and CDBG activities starting July 21st, 2020. So HCD is currently operating within its final year of this con plan, and we're operating within the annual action plan 5, which began July 1st, 2024 and ends June 30th of 2025. The next 5 years of CDBG and home funding will be predicated upon approved FY 26 through 30 con plan goals. The proposed FY 26 through 30 con plan goals listed in order of priority include affordable housing, development and redevelopment, public services, economic development, and public facilities and improvements. Each goal has strategies to support activities eligible for CDBG and home entitlement funding, and the strategically focused and narrow goals target high needs activities to more effectively maximize the impact in our community. Prioritization of these projects is key to successfully reducing poverty and to meeting the needs of the LMI community more efficiently and successfully. The affordable housing development and redevelopment goals strategies include or listed by priority, primarily focus on development, redevelopment, and rehabilitation of single-family home buyer and rental projects and multifamily rental projects. Activities to support eligible home buyer, homeowner, and rental households are included to ensure residents receive maximum wraparound assistance in either purchasing and or maintaining their housing situations. And these strategies strongly mirror activities listed within the approved affordable housing strategic plan. The public services goal strategies listed by priority focus primarily on homeless and youth targeted activities that serve low to moderate income households and families. These top 2 focused goals are in direct response to the increased number of people experiencing homelessness and youth experiencing violence in the Athens community. The third strategy supports affordable housing, economic development, and public facilities and improvements driven strategies to connect much needed services for other goal areas and can include programs for job training, housing counseling, and supportive services for facilities. The homeless strategy strongly mirror activities listed within the strategic plan to reduce and prevent homelessness. The economic development strategies listed by priority focus on economic revitalization of neighborhoods and the support of micro enterprise businesses, which is defined as 5 or fewer employees, including the owner. For low to moderate income individuals, CDBG regulations allow community business development organizations to conduct community economic development and neighborhood revitalization activities in defined neighborhood revitalization strategic areas, also known as NERSAs. And finally, the public facilities and improvements goal listed strategies listed by priority focus on activities that serve low to moderate individuals or projects that target areas identified as low to moderate area benefit because 51% or more of the population in a specified census tract have been identified as LMI. Most public comments received were of a neutral or general nature and not specific to the actual draft FY 26 through 30 con plan goals. All public comments, despite their nature, will be included in the final 26 through 30 con plan regardless, and all concerns and questions will be addressed throughout the plan development. The annual action plan 1 is due to HUD by May 17th. After a 30-day public review period is completed, but submission is always contingent upon the annual HUD allocation and award announcement date. So if funding has not been announced before that May 17th deadline, a CPD notice will be released by HUD, and we will have a later con plan AAP submission date. And now questions and comments.
Questions from the group?
Thank you. I just want to make sure when it's coming up. Affordable housing development and redevelopment, to foster an affordable housing market that meets the needs of Athens. Redevelopment would be like rehabbing, like renovation, picking up.
That's rehab. Redevelopment would be more like purchasing a building and then turning it into housing. So maybe you could buy like an old school and turn it into housing. That would be redevelopment. Rehab of existing units, no matter whether it's homeowner occupied or even rental units, would still qualify. So we've tried to encompass all of those potential activities based on the AHIS strategies.
Would the Mac Burning House be kind of an example of a redevelopment?
It would. The Mac Burning House at 853 Reed Street would be a good redevelopment example. It was a single house that was converted into 4 apartments. That could be considered.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What about housing? I think we're missing some things here. And when I say that, we talk about that we need affordable housing, but do we know how much vacancies or affordable or I give a perfect example. Right now in Athens-Clarke County, we got 300 HUD homes, either is up for sale or redevelopment or rehab. I think we need to look at how much inventory we actually got. I went to 2 complexes in my, I won't call their names, in my district. I was the property manager. One of them was maybe 2 or 3 years old. Asked them about their vacancy rate. They're 2 or 3 years old. Okay. They always say only got 7% occupancy rate. So I'm saying all this to say, I think we got more housing than we realize. I guess, and I'm going this way, can we find out as HCD or the manager, what do we have actually vacant? Is there an avenue that we can pursue? Because
we can try.
It's difficult. It may be, but I think, we're looking at, and I think some of my colleagues, Obina Thornton's email, consistently we are building multi-family units consistently. We're building also single family, and I'm a big proponent of family. But as we continue to do that, we're adding so much inventory, well, we gotta get to the point, not a bad problem. We'll get to the point that we got so many vacancies because they're lower the cost and stuff, but do we want to be there? So I think we need to really think about that, well, what we got from an inventory standpoint right now, and then look at as we move forward with our land use, are we gonna continue to allow developers to continue to build multi-family units? So I just think that's something we need to think about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The difference is the vacancy of market rent affordable or market rent units versus affordable housing units. And what we were able to figure out during the affordable housing investment strategy was that there's a deficiency of about 8,500 affordable housing units. So even if there's vacancies within the higher market rent apartments, it's not going to positively impact the amount of affordable housing we don't have that's needed to fill the gap. So what we would hope is that the market would shift enough to where those market rent value units would go down because we have enough housing to make it more competitive. The workforce development study that we did, I think they did it in 2015. What we found was a lot of apartments didn't want to tell us their vacancy rate. There was an extreme difficulty. They weren't real big on sharing that vacancy rate because they didn't want to get back to corporate that they were. So they just weren't real big on sharing. But we could certainly try.
I told them who I was, and I'm just curious. I'm gonna ride through some of my multifamily apartments. Just ask a question, and to your friend, both property managers told me what they got. So again, I just want us to be really cautious as we, as developers, seem like more and more developers come in, want to be a multi-family unit. We know we got land use coming up, and I just don't want us to get stuck where we got all these units. I think I'm blighted. When I moved here back in 1988, east side, all those apartments are now, those were top-notch apartment units. Now they blighted, some of the blighted areas. So I think we need to really be cautious as a community, as a commission, as how we move forward, we think about housing. And you're right, we need more market rate housing. But I just think we just need to really take a look at that and see how we really compare. And is it necessary when the developers come forward and say, hey, we're gonna vote for you to do this development. We say affordable housing, well, wink, wink, there's so much for. So I think we just really need to take a look at that. So again, that's not on y'all. I think that's more so on us as commissioners to make those decisions.
But we'll certainly take that into consideration.
Well, Commissioner Fisher, I appreciate you bringing that up because what's coming in front of the commission over the next year and a half will be some of those decisions as it relates to growth concept, future land use plan map, and service delivery map for PUD. Without water and sewer, development just can't occur, right? So those three things are coming to y'all in the next year and a half. Those are going to be critical decisions. In addition to that, what's the outcome of the new comprehensive plan and a future land use plan map is possibly zoning changes. So that's where the commission gains. That's now that you don't have control now, you will be able to have more levers in your toolbox to be able to dictate exactly what you want.
Melissa, Carol, and then Jesse.
Yeah, this question is kind of for management. We budgeted for this property tax analysis
Urban
study.
3.
Yes. Would that get into some of these multifamily units that are just hoarding vacant property, vacant units?
Not necessarily.
And determining their tax valuation?
Not necessarily. It'll speak more to the cost of service delivery. So, the infrastructure costs going to developments way outside of our core, opposed to the development within them. So it'll give you a cost benefit analysis, if you will. But also analyze roadway networks. So it's not going to really do what the affordable housing study did and look at vacancy rates and look at cost of housing.
I thought it was supposed to determine some kind of fairness in property taxation.
So usually what they look at is cost of community services and kind of tax generated per acre versus the cost of services consumed per acre. So I believe they're going to do some baseline work, but they won't be able to say like building A has a assumed vacancy rate of 72% or 28%.
I just wonder if there's any means through which we could incentivize some of these large, multifamily complexes to bring down their rates to make them affordable for regular working folks rather than keeping those rates jacked up and targeting the higher income.
The challenge that you all know here is that we have a population that has a lot of money as it relates to the students, right? Like they can come in and just spend a lot on housing, which is great because students are really, a positive thing as it relates to our community, I think. However, there are pros and cons to those things. Now, generally speaking, for supply, cost, right? So that's kind of what we've been talking about. And I recognize that the vacancy rates and the market rate units are probably, probably higher than we think.
Yeah.
Probably higher than we think. But we do know the vacancy rates in the affordable housing units are low.
Non-existent.
So now there is a train of thought that we go out and build a bunch of affordable housing, right? But you probably could build too much at some point in time, in theory, right? So because there's market rate units out there that eventually are going to go down. So, where's that balance? And that study, the Urban 3 study is not going to tell us that.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring the comments back to the consolidated plan, because some of these questions, are we going into the affordable housing next on that? But on this consolidated plan, when I look at the, comparing the goals, I'm trying to find that chart. The chart page 16 to 17 and the kind of programs, we got four big rectangles, and before we had 6 big rectangles there. Are there any things, what are we leaving out, or are they all pulled into under public services?
We've consolidated and been more targeted in our approach this time. This is very wide spectrum. It allows for pretty much almost everything that you could possibly do with public services, because the education and enrichment is specific to youth. The homeless services has been targeted public service, and the special populations has been public service. It's the smallest pot of money we have, but the largest number of applications that we've got. So we're trying to narrow it down and be a lot more specific to where we're putting our money so we can have the biggest bang and impact on this community.
So let me make it more blunt here. Are there any things that we're funding now through these different federal funds that will not be eligible for the funds in the next 5 years?
Funding. No, they would all still be eligible.
That's all I wanted to know.
Well, yeah, and when you focus on, when you look at the public service, the third strategy is to provide supportive services for eligible low to moderate income individuals in support of affordable housing, economic development, and public facilities and improvements, goal driven. So that's why I said, and a good example would be like soft skill job training and placement. You're not actually creating a job or placing someone in, but you're helping them to get the skills that they can to get a job. That's an economic development driven goal. So they could apply for that as a public service, as an economic driven goal. And the other example was the housing counseling. That is attached to the affordable housing goal. So that would be an eligible public service activity. It just really narrows it down to, does your program fit within this affordable housing, economic development, or public facilities and improvement strategies if it's outside of youth and homelessness? Our money it just doesn't go as far as we would like for it to.
Right.
So again, you have a 15% cap on your public services, but we get the majority of our applications for public services. You can only fund so many where your impact is minimal, and we're really trying to maximize. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I guess my questions, there's kind of a couple that might flow into each other kind of naturally. Could you help me understand, I mean, the con plan, as opposed to the comp plan, mayor and commission, strategic plan and public utility service delivery strategy, we have all these different plans. So can someone from the manager's office or you, Melinda, help me kind of make sense of how the con plan, its Venn diagram with all these other ones does and does not overlap? Which ones speak, which order, that sort of thing.
So again, the FY 26 through 30 consolidated plan strongly mirrors existing strategic plans. The affordable housing investment strategy, the strategic plan to reduce and prevent homelessness, ACC Gov's strategic plans. We looked at the school district strategic plan, Envision Athens plan. So we've looked at those and tried to make sure that our goals are in line with those and not contrary to, but complementing. The whole point of the CDBG and home programs are to fill gaps. So we look at what's out there and what can our money do to fill the gaps that still exist in services and provision in the county.
if I might add too, the consolidated plan is a requirement for us to receive entitlement funds. So it's not like we want to go out and create another plan, but what we wanted to do, I don't want to speak for you here, is that we wanted to make sure that we didn't have different plans saying different things. So one's correct. We wrap everything into this required document to make sure HUD knows we're doing the same thing. Make sure y'all know we're doing the same thing. Make sure the community knows we're doing the same thing. More importantly, make sure our staff knows.
And so the comp plan is required by the state.
Comp plan is required by the federal government.
This plan.
On plan.
Comprehensive plan.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So the comp or the comprehensive plan is required by the state, and then the consolidated plan is required by HUD.
Correct.
Specifically for us to be an entitlement community.
That's right. And the comp plan is a planning document.
Because they both have similarly uber ambitious sort of, very
20 years.
far-reaching realms.
Yeah.
Well, this is.
So I guess my other question for this plan specifically, but I guess it kind of speaks to all the other plans too. At what point does a new idea get entered? And I'm thinking of specifically the Economic Development Department and the Planning Department as maybe the most relevant to what I read in HCD's mission. I mean, obviously the history of HCD used to be HED and there was, Economic Development Department pulled out from it, but I'm curious, like, how did these departments speak to each other? Like, when you're at this phase of you're developing this to align it, if there's some amount of tweaking or emphasizing that's done. Is the Economic Development Department part of this discussion when you're talking about the part of the mission, the third part of the mission, which is promotes economic mobility among residents? Like, how much is HCD kind of in a silo here developing this, I guess is my question. You're looking at the other plans, but.
I don't think that we're siloed. I think they do a specific amount of work. We try to fill in the gaps of the work that they're not doing. So a good example, they work with JDA. Is that their name? Yeah. For small business. Well, we fund a couple of micro enterprises that could connect once they've developed their business or are trying to expand to connect with that in order to make that happen. So we're not working within a silo. It's just that their focus and ours is a little different based on the funding. So there's only certain types of activities we can do with the funding we have.
And in our strategic plan, the affordable housing goal, HCD also reaches out or has contact with the Economic Development Department and the Planning Department. So that's kind of an affinity group, if you will. And speaking to that, so my old portfolio as assistant manager was economic development planning, housing. So all those things are right there. Now that's Saunders' portfolio. So the silos, there may be silos just naturally. There are ways for people to connect within that portfolio.
So what I'm hearing from this is, you're speaking with them, they're feeding into this, the stuff that they're working on is feeding into this. Does any of this also impact what their departments do? I mean, the Economic Development Department doesn't have a HUD requirement for a plan like this, right? So would this strategy in any way affect how the Economic Development Department approaches its, priorities with regard to workforce development?
Not that I'm aware of. It's never been communicated.
I mean, there's some overlap on housing. So for example, the inclusionary housing ordinance, which is voluntary, when that comes in as a planning function, HCD serves an administrative and oversight role, kind of ushers that portion across. And that's why both of them participate in the GIT committee. So I'd say with economic development, my observation has been, it has been a little more divide and conquer, where there's a kind of stronger understanding of who's going after the industrial players and who's working on youth workforce development. Now, certainly the responsibilities of both departments have changed pretty significantly over the last 18 to 24 months. And so there are almost certainly opportunities for more cross-pollination there.
Okay, well then I guess the last part of this, and then I'm done, is with planning specifically, kind of a ripe time. This is, once every 5 years theoretically, once every 10 years big time, but it's really the first time in over 20 years that we're really looking at redoing our future land use and our zoning code. So how much is this plan feeding into that? Because clearly what we do with our zoning is gonna have a big effect on how much affordable housing can be built by right and things like that, right? So is this plan,
I think the affordable housing investment strategy is going to feed into the future land use plan map, comprehensive plan, and ultimately our zoning more so than this.
okay.
Was this a hand up here?
Me, but after you just said that, I don't even know if I want to ask my question. But just for the record. Is there, like a policy or a plan for like blighted areas that, are county owned that we could possibly rehab or tear down and rebuild? I know that we won't serve as the landlord. But is there like a policy as far as the funding goes, the area, the type of restrictions, how they're accepted, how they're not accepted?
I think the next presentation.
I was gonna say
So
next
start
presentation.
answering your question.
That's exactly what I was gonna say next.
That's one more. Since we did 21 to 25, is there any way to see what's been our track record as as we giving out, yeah, at home that we bought, I know we working on Athens-Clarke right now. I'd like to see what our track record has been over the last 4 years, if we can.
No, if you look on the attachment 3 from the CDBG annual action plan 5 that you approved, and I'm sorry? It's not in here, but I can reshare the attachment with you. It's performance of agencies that we have funded over the past since, I think it's FY 21 through 24. So it's 3-year performance. And it gives you all of the expenditure rate and the actual performance numbers, what they achieved through each year for the past 3 years. So I can make sure you get that so you can review it.
And Melinda, annually, don't we do a CAPER, consolidated annual performance and evaluation report. That speaks to what we've done that past year with our entitlement.
Correct.
So we do that every single year. We're happy to share every single one.
We're working on the FY 24 CAPER right now, and it's due September 30th. And then we're going to do a one-sheeter to kind of summarize the numbers for FY 24 closeout. And we should have that sometime in October that we could share.
I'm going to suggest that we move on, but I do want to summarize what I said. I think some of the questions that we're hearing now, we probably should have heard or been introduced to this as site commissioners, because we know we got a lot of plans. We always talk about them, but we don't. This is, I think, the first time we've talked about how they overlap. I don't know whose job that is to educate us.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Ford. Okay. So we're about to do new commissioner orientation. As you know, we're bringing a new commissioner on board. And this orientation is not just for the new commissioner. It's for everyone, if you may join. So we'll send out a schedule. I believe it's going to start the week of September 2nd. That'll be the first week, and we'll run it for, I think, 10 weeks. So I hope y'all come and join. I mean, we'll talk about duties of the attorney's office, the clerk's office, the manager's office. We'll talk about planning and public utilities. We'll talk about transit. We'll talk about housing. We'll talk about budget, police department.
And I do think I would like to be a part of that conversation, because I think there's a role of the commissioners that you would not be exposed to, and any other commissioners, because there is a relationship that has to happen. So I would love to be part of that planning, and any other commissioner that has any input.
We're finding out things, like, I didn't know we can get a per diem. I'm not called to a meeting with constituents, just found that out last week. Little things like that, I didn't know, Again, I guess you have to ask for somebody to tell me, but like sometimes the little things we miss, the phone thing, and that nobody just never talked about it. And I appreciate that you all are doing that, but I think that orientation should also include work of the commission. I think actually that's who reports to us, and I appreciate, I think the manager also got a very vital role. Like, the commission has some stuff that we're not privy to, didn't know about it, we're told, so I think we need to have that, bring to us, so.
Clerk's office will be part of our orientation as well as the auditor attorney's office. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And I guess my question back to the presentation. When we noticed, well, it was, 8,800 affordability is needed to even touch, housing shortage. And I'm wondering, does your office communicate on a regular basis with, planning department? Because they have, I understand now, they have a list of housing that's coming down the pipe that your office may or may not be aware of. Is there any kind of communication?
If it's related to inclusionary zoning, absolutely, we're a part of that process. So if they're looking for a density bonus, if it's in specific areas, then we would be a part of that whole process. If it's related to any projects that we have funding involved in, absolutely. We are in communication with them. General development, no, not typically.
And that the general development is what is stifling the affordability process. So, I would like to know, and you can just make a note, send it to me. I would like to know those developments that you're aware of that fit the two categories you just mentioned.
Inclusionary zoning and what we're funding? Sure, absolutely.
Got a quick question. I might have to email it to you, make sure I get it right. For CDBG funding, direct services that support a home operation. A lot of people, I don't say a lot of people, some people are losing their home because they're not educated on home ownership and weatherization, rehabbing people's home. Do you have a list of the providers who help people weatherize, fix their homes, and how much money is contributed to goes to that every year?
I can list several right now that are doing that. You have the Historic Athens, they have the HAMP program, but they also are funded with CDBG for homeowner occupied rehab. That includes weatherization. You have the Athens Land Trust, who is running their Young Urban Builders program. They're receiving CDBG and general funds for that. They also are doing homeowner rehab, including weatherization activities. So, and Habitat, Athens area Habitat for Humanity has their Brushes with Kindness homeowner occupied rehab. So you've got 3 entities that are right now running different funding sources, but they're all doing homeowner occupied rehab, including weatherization.
Do you get like the data of how many people are helped in a dollar amount?
Absolutely. If they're funded with our funding, then we have that on a monthly basis. They're reporting to us what expenditures and what work has been done, how much was put toward the house, and we have that information.
Thank you.
And there's a general, but there is a stipulation, if they already have received, there's something.
With CDBG, because we're changing our policies to expand, it was 5,000 within 5 years. However, with the expansion of assistance policies, and if the agencies are interested in taking that on and in increasing their activities beyond $5,000, then they would be able to receive up to a certain amount within that 5-year frame.
So the ones that you mentioned, and I was the one who said stop asking questions. The one that you mentioned, the ones that you mentioned, most people are only familiar with Action. Is Action still doing weatherization?
They're still doing weatherization, but they're not funded through us.
Okay,
So we don't.
That's who people usually go to. So
Right.
the 3 you're mentioning, I don't think.
They can certainly go there.
And also, Nikki and Andrew, I know y'all got this question answered for me, but let me ask her. for Historic Athens, they're only able to do with the funding 3 houses per quarter. And so is that a policy change if we wanted to? If we wanted to,
Give them
more money?
That's a capacity thing.
Oh, okay,
If we funded based on their application.
okay.
If they said that they were only able to do 3 houses a quarter because of capacity, then we would want to review and analyze where they are at their expenditure rate and performance rate from time of contract execution to now. Are they on schedule to spend that money? Are they behind? Are they ahead? If they're ahead and they can do more, then we would recommend more funding. If they're on track, we would not, because that means that they're only going to be able to do what they said they're going to be able to do before that contract terminates. And if they're behind, we certainly would not.
Right.
Because we need to get them on track. But it really does boil down to a capacity issue. What they have to deal with is finding enough contractors to do the level of work that needs to be done. And that has become quite a struggle. It's just contractors are so busy, it's difficult to find them. So a lot of that restriction is not just their staff capacity, but it's actual contracts capacity.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Question for Mr. Johnson. A former employee CDBG funding for some types of infrastructure.
Yes.
Public infrastructure, but it's very specific.
Yeah, so who applied? I mean, have anybody ever applied for that?
Leisure Services has applied.
Oh.
All of the work that they've done in the past has been considered public infrastructure, public facilities and infrastructure work. They built, with CDBG funds, they created the Rose Street sidewalk. They created the walking trail between EADC facility and that was public facilities project funded with
Has
CDBG.
any other outside look ever applied for that?
Salvation Army was awarded this past year for public facilities improvements.
That's good to know. Okay, next, slide, next presentation. We're finished.
Presentation? All right,
Next presentation.
let me share my screen. Okay, now we're going to discuss the affordable housing investment strategy implementation. We'll take a look at the strategies that have been funded, a housing trust fund, the implementation strategies, and then get some final thoughts. We're here to consider the best method to implement and carry out the housing trust fund activities, which include the gap financing for low-income housing tax credit, LIHTC, single-family affordable housing fund, and the acquisition strike fund.
Melinda, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but I'm going to. Just want to be clear. We were asked to come back to y'all, CDO, on how we were going to do this. So Melinda and her team have worked extremely hard, worked with the attorney's office, and this is what we're coming back with, and love to hear your feedback. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Thank you. Along with payment in lieu of funding through the voluntary inclusionary zoning ordinance, which may also be used for this purpose, gap financing for LIHTC projects is now funded with $2 million in general funds. LIHTC projects use federal funding, which is administered by the state to carry out affordable rental projects. LIHTC has 2 application types, 9% and 4%, and these types of projects serve as the primary means of creating affordable rental housing across the country. LIHTC gap financing may be provided as low-interest loans or grants and serves as gap financing for projects that need further investments to carry out development activities. along with annual payment in lieu of taxes payments to the Affordable Housing Special Revenue Fund. $2 million in general funds have been allocated to carry out single-family affordable housing activities. As noted in the Affordable Housing Investment Strategy, single-family affordable housing funds are not subject to the limitations and restrictions of federal subsidy programs when used independently. This funding can be used to fill in the gaps for underfunded projects and can focus on supporting homeowners and homeownership programs through acquisition, new construction, owner-occupied rehab, and down payment assistance. $1 million in general funds has been allocated to carry out the Acquisition Strike Fund. The North Downtown Development Project is an example of how the Acquisition Strike Fund may be used to preserve and create more affordable housing units in Athens. There are a number of privately owned properties that, with an acquisition subsidy, could be purchased for the purpose of rehab and long-term rental affordability preservation. So now we'll just take a quick review of Housing Trust Fund. So a Housing Trust Fund's primary role is to provide additional funding subsidies to public and private entities that are developing affordable housing with a community. In order for the affordable housing strategic plan activities to be implemented, a Housing Trust Fund must first be established. Issues that must be considered when implementing a housing trust fund include the Georgia gratuities clause and what types of financing techniques are most desired to subsidize affordable housing activities in the community. And these are 3 examples of housing trust funds in Georgia.
Sorry.
So we don't currently have a housing ACF. Was that signed to, did the mayor assign that or?
Are you talking about a land bank authority?
And we have.
We'll get into that.
Okay.
This is when you talk about the housing activities because of the laws in Georgia, you have to have a housing trust fund to carry out. And then what entity is going to carry those housing trust fund activities out? So Savannah is managed by a nonprofit, CHSA. And then you have the Atlanta Beltline Trust Fund, which is managed by Invest Atlanta. And then of course you have Invest Atlanta. So we're going to discuss housing trust fund implementation strategies. Here you go, Land Bank Authority. Land bank authorities are able to conduct all housing trust fund activities currently funded for the AHIS implementation. ACC Gov has an existing non-operating land bank authority established, but the bylaws and structure will need to be updated to support paid staff and to specify housing trust and acquisition strike fund activities. Some pros and cons of a land bank authority. So the pros include their ability to carry out housing trust fund activities without being subject to the Georgia gratuities clause and their ability to generate their own revenue. Cons can include qualified staff that would need to be hired to carry out those housing trust fund activities and to provide the need to provide adequate funding sources until the land bank authority can begin generating its own revenue. Examples of some LBAs in Georgia include the Macon-Bibb County Land Bank Authority, the Chatham-Savannah Land Bank Authority, the Metro Atlanta Land Bank, and the Statesboro-Bullock County Land Bank Authority. Then you have development authorities. A housing development authority is able to conduct all housing trust fund activities currently funded for AHIS implementation. A development authority can focus solely on established affordable housing goals and can concentrate all existing efforts to achieve those goals. Pros and cons of a development authority. Pros of a development authority include not being subject to the gratuities clause to carry out affordable housing activities and powers of eminent domain to assist in clearing heirs' property issues. Cons include a real or perceived conflict of interest and the potential for their own strategies and agendas to be out of alignment with ACC Gov priorities. Examples of two development authorities that exist in Athens right now are the Athens Housing Authority and the Athens Downtown Development Authority.
The Winterville Joint Development Authority be another one. They do loans and for businesses and stuff.
Yeah, that would be, there's development authority.
So they could do the housing thing too, even though it's not currently what's been in the.
There would have to be statute created. If they're an economic development authority, primarily, if that's what their focus is, they would have to make some changes statutorily in order to add housing activities.
Yeah, I don't know if the Winterville Athens Joint Development Authority has the authority to do affordable housing under Georgia law, but we've looked into it. I think you're correct. That'd be some Georgia law changes we have.
And there's also like the Athens-Clarke County Development Authority or whatever, the one that sounds like the ADDA, but it's not, right? Does that one have housing powers already, or?
I think that's for industrial development, economic development purposes.
Not the Industrial Development Authority, but the joint, no, there's a fifth one.
The majority of
The Downtown Development Authority, the Industrial, and then there's the Athens-Clarke County, Athens-Clarke Development Authority, I think it's called or something.
I can tell you, based on my research, the only housing development authority that I was able to locate in Athens is the Athens Housing Authority. All of the other ones are inclined toward economic development activities.
Development Authority of the Unified Government of that.
The Development Authority of the Unified Government of Athens-Clarke County. So that one's an economic one, and the downtown one is housing and economic?
It's more economic. Business.
Also, for development authority you're talking about is for doing public projects. Like when they were utilized when the advanced behavioral building was built. I can verify that for you, Commissioner. I don't think.
The Development Authority of by government is over the property where the Publix is on the east side. That is known. So I can just. Sorry.
So my understanding is each development authority has its own flavor and purpose, and those are usually enumerated either with state legislation or if they were created locally. And so you have to kind of check against those tests. So for example, it would be very unusual to use a land bank authority and an economic development project. It's the wrong flavor tool for that purpose. As we looked at it with the attorney's office, the housing authority is an absolute yes. The downtown development authority is a maybe, but even if they did, it would only be in their jurisdictional boundary of the CBD.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the focuses is how you make sure that whomever operates these funds operates within the parameters of what ACC Gov wants is to create a very solid IGA, interdepartmental government agreement, and also to make sure that those bylaws represent what the county is looking for when it's created, if it's a land bank authority.
So, Melinda, could Athens-Clarke County go into a partnership with the Athens Housing Authority to complete Savannah Heights?
We already are.
Oh, okay.
We just funded with home money to develop 3 more of those Savannah Heights units.
Oh, you do?
Yes. But technically, if you decided that you wanted the Athens Housing Authority as a development authority established for affordable housing activities, if that is who you want to carry out the Housing Trust Fund, yes, you could. You could make an agreement, an intergovernmental agreement with them that outlines specifically what the funding is to be used for, how it's to be allocated, and where it's to be focused. That is, which is why we have them up here, because that is something that's possible.
They should have. They should have listed that when we were talking about the nonprofits that we changed. They're not listed.
Housing authorities?
It was. They should, I mean, it's no big deal. I'm sorry, Jesse, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
I think maybe what Patrick and I are trying to get at is we've got all these development authorities already. And if the only one that maybe could be used for housing is the Downtown Development Authority, and I guess my question is, would we be talking about if we wanted to have one that was more within the purview of us, of the unified government than just the housing authority? Would we be talking about trying to modify like the charters of one of the existing ones or creating a whole new sixth development authority in Athens?
I would say that you have the option of, as I said before, when we were talking about the Land Bank Authority, it's not operating at this moment. You could revisit their current structure, their bylaws, their ordinance, update that to reflect what you want to see. And then the IGA that's created between the county and them clearly outlines what funding is available, specifically how it's to be used so that they carry out the activities. The same would go for the housing authority, except you would not create or modify their bylaws. You would just have to structure an IGA that very clearly, again, outlines so that there is no conflict of interest. You cannot use this to fund your own stuff unless this.
Sorry if I was unclear. That I understand with the housing authority, but these other development authorities, if we wanted to have one that was more like the whole board is appointed by Clarke County, right? The way that our existing downtown development authority is. But downtown development authority can only be for downtown. So the other development authorities we have, they can look at the whole county, like the joint development authority or the development authority of the unified government of Athens-Clarke County. What a name. Would we be talking about like modifying the charters of those development authorities, or is that kind of like in stone as it is and we'd have to make a whole new one?
Well, there's a couple of options. It might be possible to modify, you couldn't modify the charter, the state legislature could. You have to get them to agree to do that. And for some of those economic industrial development authorities, if it's already like a certain kind of authority, you gotta be careful when you change it. So we have to do some research on that. But like Savannah, for example, they have created affordable housing authority, but they had to get the cooperation of the state legislature to do that, you know? So I guess the answer to you is we could look in whether we could modify an existing authority for, perhaps, but we couldn't do it on our own. We'd have to have the cooperation, have to be done through our local delegation, the state legislature, or we could look at even creating a new authority specific for that purpose, you know.
But in either case, the state legislature has to
be involved in that process, right? And that's not the case for when we talk about the land bank authority. It's a little different.
That's right.
Mr. Gould, your question, I think the land bank authority could accomplish what I think where you might go.
I could have sworn we didn't go through for the Winterville Joint JDA. We
It
created.
did not, because that was statutorily created by Georgia statute, and it's very specific though what it can do about.
Can modify that charter to say.
I can look at it. I think it's, I don't know the answer. I didn't know, I'm not aware of one that's used for affordable housing, but I can look at the state law. Like that structure is already set up that says that local cities and counties can opt in to follow that structure on the code to create a joint development authority. But it's really specific purposes about what it can do.
Yeah.
You can, and if it's listed as one of the things it can do in the Georgia code, you could. Otherwise, you'd have to amend the Georgia code to allow it to do that.
Anybody else?
Okay, so finally, you have the Housing and Community Development Department, who currently manages over 67 active contracts to support affordable housing, economic development, public services, and public facilities and improvements activities funded with federal CDBG, home investment partnerships programs, and continuum of care funds with ACC Gov general funds. HCD does not currently provide direct assistance to the community. Pros of managing the Housing Trust Fund activities is our existing established relationships with community housing partners, and existing paid staff already managing affordable housing and compliance activities. Cons of HCD managing housing trust funds includes its limitation of operating short or long-term loan programs only due to the gratuities clause and the need for staff to gain necessary training to carry out these activities. So in closing, to implement all housing trust fund activities in a way that allows differing funding allocation processes and avoids violation of the Georgia gratuities clause, the Land Bank Authority is most likely the most effective and efficient way to do so. And that is it. So now the floor is open for discussion.
Okay, so we just saw this presentation. One, it looks like we have to make some decision about establishing one of these groups. That's an action that needs to come out of this, right? I mean, if we want to provide grants, forgivable loans, non-loan assistant or direct services, right? So that's one of the things that we have to go through. So just to be clear, so the beginning of this presentation seemed to me that there were two parts. The mention where there were numbers, like the gap financing, the single family with 2 million, and the acquisition strike fund, that we put those into the general budget, right? So are those, I want to see the connection between those and this Land Bank Authority is the idea that, okay, but let me make sure you know my question, because I mean, maybe you do, but I'm not sure I know it yet. Is that the fact that we have to be able to use these funds, we would need to be able to establish one of these things if they were going to be something that challenged the gratuities clause. Is that correct? Because we haven't spent.
Think what we're, we've looked at, having Courtney Davis from my office do, she's been in contact with Atlanta, Savannah, and Macon about what those communities are doing as far as their affordable housing and implementing their strike fund. Savannah and Macon, I can confirm, she told me they use their Land Bank Authority. They, like, for example, Macon set aside this year $500,000 for their Land Bank Authority, actually it was last year, to go out and acquire properties. Because Land Bank authorities have certain flexibilities to do those type of things. They can clean up a title and there's taxes and stuff. And then they also, a nonprofit was formed, a nonprofit, or Atlanta, Macon also set aside $7.5 million in ARPA funds to provide a nonprofit that was formed called like Macon Affordable Housing Fund Incorporated. And that entity's job is to make loans that are repayable, and it's creating a revolving loan fund, which you refer to as the housing trust fund, I guess. And that's the same model basically that Savannah's following. They're using that model. That seems, I think that's what you indicated Atlanta's doing. We haven't confirmed yet, but I saw where you talked about Atlanta using nonprofit.
Yeah, Invest Atlanta.
So I think that's what I'm going to recommend. I think that's the model to follow. Now, you could use what's the model? The Land Bank Authority plus a nonprofit.
Yeah. Okay, but you are saying, just on a very basic level, that in order to move forward with the funds, we haven't done anything with these funds in the beginning. And in order to move forward with that.
Of course, now staff may disagree with what I just said.
Yeah.
I think that's.
Well, I'm just trying even to understand.
I'd like to hear
so
what the other model is before we go forward with it.
So it's just a matter of, right, at this point, we got to figure out a model so that we can spend those funds.
Correct.
Use those funds effectively for affordable
Now, we
housing.
were told this, and we haven't confirmed it, we were told when we were talking to Savannah, and Nikki was on the call, and so was, y'all were all on the call, that Rome is using their Land Bank Authority to acquire the properties and make the loans. But we haven't, I've asked, Courtney's in the process of trying to talk to them to confirm that. Well, we haven't confirmed it yet. So if we look holistically at a housing trust fund, how does the government use these incentives for affordable housing? You have to figure out your administrative component, the programmatic elements with it, and then the funding for those elements. We've actually kind of built this backwards. So we built through the last budget or through the strategic plan, you've identified the programmatic elements. And then in the last budget, funds were set aside into a special revenue fund that are being held for those purposes. So this is a discussion about administration. And what is the best way to consolidate that administration in a way that can get those funds out there for those purposes with kind of the least amount of strings attached and the least amount of expense to do so?
Can I get some?
Well, I just want
differing-
to say, I would also support using the housing authority as well. We haven't found an example where they're making loans yet, or he hasn't, but I don't doubt they could. That's what they do, but I'd like,
What it boils down to specifically is that a land bank authority, besides being able to carry out housing trust fund activities, they can do public land distribution activities, acquisition. So they can go beyond just the housing trust fund. But if you want them to operate a housing trust fund with 5 million general dollars or funds, they could do it as a forgivable loan. They could do it as a grant. They could do it as a short-term, long-term. They could do it as an amortization. They have the ability to do it on a much more flexible basis. Whereas if HCD were to operate them, it would have to be a short-term or a long-term loan. There could not be a grant. It could not be forgivable.
when we talked with Savannah's Land Bank Authority, their executive director, another thing you realize, Savannah's been doing this for 20 years, y'all. I mean, this is, and so I'm not just saying it took some time. If y'all I read your own, the consultants report we did, it estimated it would take from 12 to 18 months for us to set this thing up. You remember reading that? But my point is, I don't remember Miss Goldie. She said, she didn't seem to be a proponent of the land banks making the loans, I didn't think, because you gotta have a certain, it's some FDI regs and stuff. And so she was pushed back against that. But she did say Rome may be doing that. She said Rome was doing that, but I'm just saying we need to verify that.
She wasn't a proponent of it.
She wasn't a proponent at all.
But it could be
Well,
done.
we don't know that. She said she thought Rome was, but I'd like to verify that. I know they're not doing it in Savannah, they're not doing it in Macon.
There's a possibility of a hybrid approach.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. There is another possibility here. Andrew and Linda have talked about it a lot. Now, we didn't put it out here because we just really weren't sure. But Andrew, I'll defer to you on this.
So within those enumerated funding things, you know, that you've got the LIHTC funding, which could be a loan, it could be a grant, you know. What you do have, there's the strike fund, right? The idea that you're going to go acquire a property specifically to preserve it to affordable housing. The Land Bank Authority then can sell it to a private developer with strings attached. They can deed it to the housing authority or a nonprofit developer. They have significant flexibility. And so that is an obvious go. And I will point out that the Land Bank Authority is a topic on the GOC. So it's a very timely manner here that, you know, that this might be a good first tool. It may not be the only tool, I think is what you're hearing from Judd.
No, I'm saying no question, use your land bank to acquire the properties. There's no question, that's the way everybody's doing it. I'm just not sure your land bank authority can make the loans you're talking about. Another thing y'all need to realize too is these land banks are fully staffed. I mean, these land banks have at least 3 staff people. Macon has 3. Savannah, she said had herself and 1 other or 2 others. I mean, so they're funded well, I mean, to be able to carry out these activities. I'm just making a point.
And that was going to get to my next point, which is in the infancy of this, it may be what I call the Frankenstein approach, where HCD staff can provide some technical advice on setting up the Land Bank Authority, working on bylaws, similar to how economic development nurtures the JDA. But if you're going to really move $5 million at a regular basis, at some point, to Judd's point, you're going to need staff. And it's not only going to be administrative staff. You're going to need legal expertise. You're going to need real estate expertise. And that may be stuff you contract with or use outside counsel on. But I think that may be the takeaway from this is we would suggest starting with the Land Bank Authority, looking at what powers can be there, working with the GOC on what that structure can be. And then you can kind of come back with here's how much that got you. Here's how much of that $5 million and more tools that have been placed on the table than if only it was through HCD.
Hold up just a bus, Mr. Fisher.
Couple things. The Land Bank Authority, does that mean establish and authority or some folks to run this thing.
Board.
Yeah, a board. Okay. I know they're gonna-
But to Judd's point too, if, I think Andrew may have said it, if you want this thing to start clicking on all cylinders, it probably will require additional staff. So that's not what we're recommending here because that's going to be money, right? Short term, maybe, the Frankenstein. Ultimately, Judd's right, we have to consider funding staff.
That was in my mind, again, the sustainability.
I'm not trying to be the purveyor of bad. I'm trying to be a purveyor. of
Oh, hold up, we got you.
Just telling you.
We got you.
And the reason because I know.
We got you. I promise you. Still, we got you.
Judd's doing good work.
Just doing
I'm
good
gonna
work.
make sure y'all don't take me to court and say I said nothing. Wait, go ahead.
I got one more. Other thing is, we got this, money with Athens first right now. And I guess my thing is, if we do this, are we gonna be tied into a geographical area? Or is it gonna be some type of zone? If we do that, I think we add impact in.
Well, it's interesting you say that. Some communities, like I've been reading all this stuff, trying to, some communities they designate certain zones where they really want to emphasize the plan. You know what I'm saying? Some communities don't. That's an element you as the policymaker can decide. Like, like Macon Bibb has certain, if you go on their land, they're focused on certain neighborhood. So that $7.5 million in ARPA funds they set aside, they've got like 4 different neighborhoods that are really, and you gotta understand, Macon's a lot different here. It's got a lot of really blighted areas. But they've got 4 areas where they can spend 4 different, in large areas and neighborhoods where they can spend that 7.5. Really blighted, depressed neighborhoods. But you don't have to do that, but you make a good point. That's one thing to consider. You can go that far, but I mean, that's 7.5 million. They've made it's a big commitment, But understand too, I'm trying to tell you, Macon Bibb has had a land bank authority and active land. I used to meet once a week with the executive director of the land bank authority there, who's now in Savannah. She's been doing it 20 years. They've been at it a long time. You follow what I'm saying? So they didn't get there overnight. So I want you to realize. Yeah.
So, my concern is we get to this point, and we say we're gonna do this, and then the money will not get out as it needs to be. I don't want to be limited to a certain geographical area if we decide to do this. And look at, because I know right now with the money that's at the Athens first, I'm sure how many applications we got, maybe 3 or 4. If they are, I'm not sure. I know they're having a hard time trying to find people that qualify for those funds. So I just want to be a little bit more
Broad.
geographical. We start looking at depending on what direction we're gonna go with this.
Jesse's next and then Carol.
So I think what I'm hearing clearly is that the land bank authority could be set up to just be for the whole county. There's no specified geographic areas unless for some reason you don't want to. So I think that probably addresses your concern. I think, so I just want to understand clearly, we passed the FY25 budget and basically set up the special revenue fund with like 3 sub-projects, I guess it's called. Is that what, yeah. Buckets or whatever, and that money's just kind of sitting there dormant until there is some kind of entity that can activate it. And you're proposing the land bank authority is an entity that we could revitalize, take out of its zombie state, and it could do all 3 of those. So all 3 of those type of funds that we want activated could all be achieved by the land bank authority, or is the land bank authority really just doing
Strike fund.
the strike fund? So the strike fund seemed obvious to me, and then the stuff around the loans seemed like it applied to most, at least, of what we were talking about with the single family housing one. What seemed less clear to me was the stuff around the LIHTC funding. Is the land bank authority going to manage that, or do we also need to figure out like another entity to do?
Based on my research, and there was an attachment that I will send to you, or a manager's office can send to you, that was a part of the AHIS, and it talks about how to establish a housing trust fund in the state of Georgia based on the home laws, gratuities clause, how to overcome that. One of the entities that is perfectly capable of carrying out housing trust fund activities is a land bank authority. And that includes all of the activities that have been funded, But it also includes, which is why I added it in, it also could include your inclusionary zoning funding. It could include your existing affordable housing pilot.
Okay, so the Land Bank Authority could be basically our umbrella organization that manages all this stuff. Instead of it kind of being amorphously the Clarke County government, which is sort of HCD taking on more things than it's maybe designed to. Is that essentially what I'm hearing here?
We're saying HCD could do it, but we would be much more limited in how we could carry that out.
And so
Because
would the oversight of inclusionary zoning also be done by the Land Bank Authority? You know, like we've talked about somebody who goes out and audits like whether.
No, that would still be HCD. We would still manage the affordability.
So the Land Bank Authority is a way that we could quickly move on the $5 million that's been put into our budget.
Respectfully, I'm not ready to agree with that yet.
So as.
I'll share it with you.
Here's what I was gonna say.
I'm going to.
Let me share it with you.
I mean, I respect that consultant. We'd be the only, we'd be the only ones who's offered to do that.
No, Invest Atlanta does it all the time. That is what Invest Atlanta does.
They're a nonprofit. They're a nonprofit though. That's.
No, they're quasi.
Well, I don't think so.
So the Land Bank Authority is going to be GOC, right? So the Land Bank Authority is going to be in GOC, and these conversations can occur in GOC. But here's what we know today. The Land Bank Authority, if reactivated, can deal with the strike fund. I think we all understand that and agree with that. Commissioner Hool, your question about LIHTC, well, and the $5 million or the $2 million for gap financing. Well, we kind of do that already. So think about Athens-Clarke.
Yeah.
We provided the funding for that, the pilot payment and all that stuff. It's gap financing.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
Yeah.
So we can do that, right? For the time.
That's
So when you say we can do that,
The unified government can do that, right? We're doing it right now.
So which department? Would that be HCD? Would that be the?
Currently, it's been the manager's office.
Okay.
Andrew and Melinda have been working on another deal that's in front of us right now. Okay, so that is something the unified government can continue to do. Now, ultimately, if conversations come out in a certain way in GOC, maybe that can be given to the Land Bank Authority as well.
So I think I'm hearing Carol chomping at the bit for the same thing I'm trying to get to here. She's basically like, we could, without creating a new entity, do some of the stuff, at least with the LIHTC.
Yeah.
But the we seems to be like it's falling ambiguously on the manager's office and whoever the manager's office brings in. And is this like straining the capacity of staff? I think I'm trying to get at like, for us to really do this effectively, do we actually need to set something like this up so that the manager's office isn't like outside of its capacity?
Andrew's currently working.
Okay, well, but I do want to say that there's a difference though between working out a pilot agreement where no money is transactional versus once they make the payment and the money sits in the trust fund, what do you do with it then? That's the difference is we are able to do those agreements and work with the
Think about
attorney.
this. That's what your land bank authority do.
Where do we put the money
All
after?
right, you gotta realize what land bank authority doing. You're gonna have staff that's gonna be going out and basically acting like a real estate agent, talking with people who are selling properties and arranging to purchase that property. Okay? And then you're gonna have then you're gonna have the attorney's office to close it and acquire property. Then you're going to turn around and market that property perhaps. I mean, I'm just saying there's a lot to it. I feel like sometimes y'all get part of the story. I want y'all to be fully informed. So I think you make a good point about capacity. I mean, it's one thing you say you're going to do, are you going to do it successfully? And then 2 years from now, y'all are upset about why nothing's happened. Well, it hasn't happened because there wasn't the capacity there to make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like if we
you know what
want
I'm
to do it
saying?
and we want to do it well, and if we want to do it in a way that's sustainable, do we need to be looking past what we could immediately do towards something that's like a structure that, so I guess what I'm hearing, the longer term thing, whatever we do in the interim in this period, whatever we can activate now with existing structure or lack thereof. The longer term vision is that a land bank authority in its most robust and adequate staffing situation could do all of the things we're talking about.
Based on much.
In the FY25 budget allocation.
To be determined,
With the attorney's office.
GOC with the attorney's office, but preliminary, yes.
I have one other totally different question, but I'll save it for after we get through this very gnarly ball of
Yeah.
thorns.
Okay. I just know that we have taken a long time with our ARPA funds. And, in the world of like, oh, if we do this again, I know a lot more than I know now, right? Than I knew 4 years ago. in terms of this, we're going in a new direction. But it's something that we need to get go. I don't want to be here 4 years from now and say, well, we were talking 4 years ago about that youth development money. Now we have 20,000 million there and we haven't spent it all. So I would love it if there was consensus among the commissioners to say, hey, you all, this is really complicated. I'm grasping some of it, but it's really complicated. You, manager's office, HCD, attorney's office, get together, give us a plan, let's move forward, and let's be ready to fund another position next year if we need this or two, and let's get it bumped to the front of the GOC line.
Or if the Land Bank Authority if the funding was there, the Land Bank Authority could be off the ground in 3 months.
Right.
Then let's pull, 50,000 out of each of the 3 buckets and just, pay that
The
person
funding's
half a year's
up
salary.
there. I'm gonna say this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say this. This is, y'all, I'm not going down that road no more, please, Hasty.
Oh, no, this is not a hasty.
No, I'm talking about Jesse's.
Oh, okay.
The 3 months. No, I'm not doing that.
I just pulled.
I mean, that's me. That's me. Now, everybody else may be in agreement. It's NGOC, bump it up. Let the folk get together and do what they need to do. Y'all know who y'all are, and come back with a recommendation. Because we're even right now, all of us are hearing this for the first time. So
and even if it's a second time or third time, it's very complicated.
Well, it's very complicated, and it looks like we're going down that same hole that we did with the mall. So we're not going to jump out here. I'm not going to jump out here. I think we got the experts in the room. Y'all meet as much as y'all need to meet. Give us something to work with. Get GOC to bump it up and give us something to work with. I'm not doing no 3 months thing, because when 3 months and it don't happen, somebody's going, no, I'm not doing it. So, that's my speech. I had a question and a statement, but I think I'll shut up right now. Anybody else?
One other totally different question.
If it's totally different.
So NOAA's, it was on slide 10 of your slideshow, I think, naturally occurring affordable housing units. We talk a lot about where's this data come from, how accurate is it? So recognizing the limits that HCD has at getting comprehensive, accurate data. But it says 78% of ACC's affordable housing rental homes are built before 1999. 78% of the affordable housing is this naturally occurring stuff. So I guess my 2-part question is, who calculated that? How did we get that?
This came from the AHIS. So
Okay,
the
so-
consultant did all of that work. They did all of the research. And this
So in
is-
order for us to get a recurring figure or more detail, we'd have to probably end up in another paying a consultant to do a deep dive kind of thing. There's no body that
There's a
regularly.
subscription that we could utilize. CoStar is a subscription that we could get. And I think we might even be using CoStar internally, so we might have to add a subscription. But we can, if that's something that the commission wants to see, this constant stream of data related to this specific thing, we have software. There is software out there that we can link into.
So I guess whether it seems worth it to see it, I guess depends on how much it would cost probably, but to me, it would seem useful to understand whether that quantity is increasing or decreasing. 78% the percent of the overall housing stock, but as our overall housing stock increases, are we, just some kind of over time, would that data be useful for us to understand when we're trying to build affordable housing, how much of it's also just naturally occurring in the community and where, things like that. So CoStar is a potential means of getting that information? I mean, do others share interest in maybe knowing what it would cost for us to
I think
build that in?
Jackson about finding out the cost.
Yeah.
We can look into that.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think on that naturally occurring affordable housing, the number is 75% of our affordable housing rental stock. I'm also curious about what percentage of our overall rental stock is naturally occurring affordable housing. What?
That's why I see it earlier.
Yeah. So, right, which is that, how much is there that, because Because theoretically, right, when we get more housing, then we have more naturally occurring affordable housing and that number would go up, right? That might be,
That's the hope.
that would be an outcome
It should be.
to see if this theory is working.
But we could
It
only.
would be
we can only
important
know
to
that
know
on-
that, but what,
No.
one thing that we have to remember is that a year and a half ago, 2 affordable housing structures, apartments were sold. And they are now market rent.
Right.
They are no longer affordable.
Right.
So we also have to not just focus on naturally occurring where we build more stock and these, what right now would be high rent may go lower, but how many of the existing affordable housing are still affordable and maintain that, or how many are coming out of that cycle and turning into market rent? So we have to keep our eyes on both of those.
I wanted to bring up one piece from the study that nobody talks about. And Nikki, interim manager Jones is going to have to help me out a little bit. But it was on the banking practices that shows that there is some discriminatory practices as far as people of color getting loans to even buy a house. So we're talking about all this stuff. And I'm really, and when you brought up about First American, you said it's only like 4 or 5 that might have been approved so far.
Got applications.
Got applications in. So is there any, Nikki, Mr. Jones, could you please expound on that for me?
Yeah, so in the affordable housing investment strategy, there was a section in there where they used data that was gathered from HUD related to lending practices. And the study did show that there seemed to be discriminatory practices as it relates to lending, just because the amount of Black folks who were getting loans were significantly less than white folks. And my understanding, the data goes a little bit further to the Black folks' ability to get a loan as well. And it was literally, the data that we saw was literally Black and white. So there's that. So, what's our approach to mitigating that? Well, there's probably a couple of different things. So we do have the AFFH, the affirmatively furthering fair housing.
Analysis of impediments to affirmatively further fair housing.
So in that, we speak to how we will help mitigate those types of practices. So one way to do that is to partner with banks and the lending institutions and just, find great partners who are willing to work with the community.
CFDIs.
Thank you. And Commissioner Fisher, we think we have a good partner right now with we think we have a good partner right there. So I think that's how it starts, right? So I think we made a good first step working with them. So if we can start working with other lending institutions in our community, just like that, I think that would bode well for just lending in general, not just, for Black folks and white.
If I think was handicapping them again, it's the census tract. I think that's what's.
Well,
They sort of tied in.
part of what's handicapping is the market. So right now, I looked, there are 8 homes in Clarke County that are available for under $200,000. And that would be the kind of market that your first-time affordable housing buyer is trying to get. So if there are in fact 4 applications, realistically, it's going to take some of that additional affordable housing supply that you all have funded with ARPA that is coming through our partners with Habitat and the Land Trust and others. Those are likely to be the homes that would also benefit from.
Are they in the census tract though? Those houses you looking at.
No, there's
They're
different areas.
spread across.
I think that's the issue. That's what I'm getting at.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. You're right. It's not a lot in that, but then you got to be in the census tract. The relationship we got with Athens First right now. To Andrew's point, can't find housing. You also got to be in that census tract in order to purchase a home.
No, they have more than one census tract. It's the focus is on a certain number of census tracts that meet the natural QTI, but it can go beyond that. census tract. So I can't give you the exact details, but I can send you the information, but they're not limited to just that. That's their priority.
Okay, because they need to specify that, because if you get the handout they got, they have to be in a census tract.
Okay, we'll check up on that because that's not, that was not the agreement.
And if that's the case, I think they want to get more people in. Maybe put their name there.
Well, again, the focus was specifically to a census tract because of what the funding was meant to do. It's meant to support people that were impacted by the Linden Town atrocity. So that's why that census tract area is their primary focus. But there is within the contract, their ability to go outside of that. So I'll follow up with that.
Please,
absolutely.
That could be critical.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what might occur in the future is they may come back to us, they being Athens First, to say, hey, the amount of down payment assistance that we're offering needs to increase. That's what Andrew's speaking to, is that if the cost of your home, if the average cost of a home is $300,000, $350,000, $20,000 for down payment assistance is not going to get it.
Exactly.
The other thing I just want to mention, and we're talking about whether we're doing with the land bank, and we're talking about purchasing land. I hope we are also, before Blaine Williams left, he was going to give me a list of land that we own that could be used for affordable housing in that bank. Nikki, can you follow up, or you see property that we already own that would be suitable, would be put in a land bank? Would you follow up on that?
I will, and I think that should be part of the conversation in GOC, because I think we do have some data we probably need to dust it off related to the amount of land that we own, the parcels of land, where they are, how large they are, and which ones would be best suited for affordable housing. So I think that data will be available for GOC conversations.
I'm going to assume there's nothing else to say. Linda, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Do we have to adjourn this work session? Y'all good? Chad, you good?
Good. Good, Chad, question for you. That might be the guy called hammer.
Holy smokes.
He hasn't heard.